Hey guys, tonight we plunge into the world beyond the silken curtains and hushed corridors, the Ottoman Harem's bloodied morning roll call, where you wake not to birdsong but to the crack of whips and the sting of cold lashes. Imagine groggy, golden shafts of dawn, light slicing through ornate lattice windows, illuminating rows of trembling women with tears already drying on their cheeks. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment below with where you're tuning in from and your local time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge from your narrow reed mat across cold marble floors, each step echoing like a warning horn. Around you, fellow odalisques, inexpertly skilled in silks but unprepared for brutality, line up in silent formation. Their faces, pale in the dawn's haze, carry fresh bruises from yesterday's clandestine beatings. A handful clutch linen wraps over swollen arms, traces of last night's punishments still crusted with sweat and tears. Mainstream accounts confirm that harem discipline often involved physical punishment for perceived laziness or insolence. Historians still argue whether these lashings were formal edicts from the Valid Sultan or ad hoc reprisals by jealous rivals. An overseer's whistle, shrill and merciless, cuts through the hush. You flinch as lash cracks echo, the sound sharper than any bell. Senior odalisques step forward, nails painted with toxic dyes, a fashion trend so extreme that some pigments caused permanent staining. Historians still debate the health impact. They peer at each of you, eyes narrowing under coal-lined lids, ready to mark you for punishment if you fail to meet their exacting standards of posture and poise. Your palms come up automatically to smooth the lavish embroidery on your dress, a futile attempt to hide trembling fingers. Sophisticated silk brocades, dyed with lac and indigo, are meant to flatter your figure, yet now they tether you to a life where beauty and brutality intertwine. Fringe tales suggest some fabrics were laced with mildly toxic metals to ensure an otherworldly sheen. Whether these were widespread or limited to the Sultan's favorites remains a subject of scholarly debate. As the senior odalisques appraise you, a sharp report rings out. A girl at the end stifles a gasp as the overseer's rod snaps against her backside. You clench your jaw, refusing to look, remembering that any stray glance or faltering breath could earn you the same fate. Yet your eyes burn with sympathy. Her dress is torn at the seam, a mark of last night's hidden scuffle. Rumors whisper of secret alliances among harem women, pacts to shield each other from punishment. But such alliances can fracture under the threat of the Sultan's favor. Line by line, the overseers call names. Each name repeated is a lifeline, affirmation you remain acceptable. For now, when your name echoes, you step forward, shoulders back, head high, your chest aching as every muscle screams protest. A quick inspection of your neckline, your hair's arrangement, the tilt of your chin. One senior's gloved hand brushes a stray curl, then snaps back. No praise, just a curt nod that barely registers on your exhaustion-addled nerves. Next, they inspect your palms for signs of rope burns from yesterday's forced drills. An odalisque found practicing dance steps in the courtyard was yanked aside and tied to a pillar, whipping ordered by a jealous peer. You flex your fingers, watching knuckles crack in the cold morning air. Minor bruises from cornflower-infused cosmetics are acceptable, but any fresh abrasion triggers suspicion of theft or insubordination. Fringe scholars debate whether harem women used makeup to disguise old bruises. Official records are silent, but your own fading violet welt suggests it's a reality. Finally, the chief overseer strides before the line, topped with a jeweled kokoshnik borrowed from the Valide Sultan's own collection. She's the enforcer of the enforcers, her voice low but resonant. 5 steps forward who spoke without permission. 5 trembling girls move as one, punishment awaiting them at sundown. You swallow hard, heart pounding, relieved it wasn't you this time, but knowing luck doesn't last in the harem. As dawn's first beams slide across the courtyard, the roll call ends. You're granted a few precious moments to breathe and steady your ragged spirit before the next trial begins. Yet the sting of lashes and the memory of your comrades' gasps linger like acrid smoke in your lungs, a reminder that in this gilded cage, beauty demands blood sacrifice and mercy is a fleeting illusion. You stumble bleary-eyed onto the marble threshold of the palace courtyard. But this isn't the haven of scented roses you imagined. It's the smoldering aftermath of yesterday's brutal abduction parade. Picture this: chained columns of young women, fresh from distant provinces, clattering across cobblestones in ankle irons, their sobs and curses echoing beneath soaring domes. You probably thought the harem was all silk cushions and perfumed gardens. Spoiler alert, you're about to find out it's a gilded cage with barbed edges. So before we go any further, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment below telling me your location and local time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You press into the crowd of recent arrivals, the air thick with dust kicked up by soldiers' boots and the metallic tang of iron. Mainstream historians confirm that the Ottomans employed the devshirme system, forcibly recruiting Christian youth from the Balkans and Anatolia to serve the Sultan, though in the harem damsels' case, selections were often from elite or tributary families rather than random levies. Historians still argue whether these seizures were more about political alliance or simple assertion of power. But from your vantage, it feels like indiscriminate plunder of innocent lives. A contingent of armed guards, murmured to be the fierce Siladar, marches alongside. Tall, silent types with scimitars at their hips and hawk-like gazes. Their leather jerkins creak with each step. Their clipped orders to the chain of captives bounce off palace walls like cannon fire. You catch a whiff of sweat, and more sweat, not your own. Thankfully, which is nice, because you've already got enough of your own after trotting up a grand staircase in slippers. A fringe account claims some guards enjoyed testing new iron alloys on runaway captives' chains, though archaeological evidence is scant. You shudder, picturing someone inventing the shockingly new Ottoman chain line at an arms expo. As the newly chained harem candidates shuffle past you, you notice their dresses, once vibrant brocades from Bursa or fine wool from Qazvin, now torn and stained with brine from tearful farewells. A girl near you wears bracelets of thin gold, likely a parting gift from her mother. You wonder if those bangles will be melted down for palace candlesticks. It's a cruel trade, beauty and wealth for bondage and uncertainty. A harried footman hurries along the line, herding stragglers with a bamboo rod like she's shepherding kittens, except these kittens may be led to lives of intrigue or tragedy rather than a sunlit back porch. Your heart squeezes when you see a trembling teenager with auburn curls smeared with pollen from the road's roadside gardens. She must have been plucked mid-play, petals still in her hair. You catch her eye and offer a weak, sympathetic nod. She blinks once in disbelief, as if wondering if sympathy can buy a ticket out of this mess. Rumor has it some arrivals bribed guards for a momentary loose cuff. A fleeting taste of freedom. Whether such bribes truly ever worked is a matter scholars still debate, judging by the tightness of her irons. She didn't win any auctions. A sudden rallying cry breaks through. Move forward. The chain jerks. You're forced to step aside as a stern-faced matron, her brow etched like a carved sepulchre, storms down the line, inspecting each girl's posture and height. She's searching for the ideal tempered beauty, the kind that will reflect well on the Sultan. You grip the edge of your tunic, reminding yourself how glad you are not to be one of the selected. Still, there's a tight knot of empathy in your chest. You can't help but think, this girl's father will never see her again, unless she prevails. An odds game with life or death stakes. Suddenly, a guard halts at the teenage girl with pollen tangled in her curls. He jabs a gloved finger at her face. Step forward, he barks, her knees tremble, and she steps out, tossing back her head as though summoning courage from thin desert air. The matron examines her face, eyes skimming over her temples, cheeks, the soft curve of her jaw, physical surveys so intimate you can almost feel the chill of the steel rod they use to measure skull shape. Anthropologists still debate the importance of cranial symmetry in imperial selection. But here, you witness symmetry turned from art into appraisal. The matron nods at last, and the girl is led away with stiff dignity, leaving raw fear in her wake. The chain lurches on, each link clinking in a mechanical lament. You watch until she disappears behind a carved niche, and a single tear rolls down your own cheek. Good thing the guards are busy marching out a stranger, because you're far too visible for tears here. You shuffle alongside the chain toward a private pavilion, the pungent bloom of gardenia trees rising on one side, contrasting starkly with the soldiers' reek of metal. A lone eunuch, a senior attendant appointed to supervise these arrivals, slides through the ranks, palms pressed against each slave's back, guiding them forward. His expression is inscrutable, a practiced calm that borders on cruelty. You imagine him as a human gate at the palace entrance, neither welcoming nor hostile, simply unrelenting. At the pavilion, silk cushions and trays of sweet sherbet await, an absurd juxtaposition, opulence masking brutality. The new captives are fed, freshened, measured for gowns. Each ritual stage another turn in their high-stakes game of survival. You linger at the edge of the pavilion, tasting the sherbet's rosewater tang, trying to reconcile sweetness with heartbreak. It's like adding sugar to spilled blood, fascinating but faintly nauseating. As the chain disperses into smaller circles for assessments, a prankish thought flits through your mind. Maybe you should tie the guard's sandals together like they do with careless camels. You snort quietly, then hush. One misplaced chuckle and you're in irons yourself, stepping back. You remember this scene is not mere window dressing. It's the threshold to a world where every gift of silk hides a hidden verdict. Every whispered compliment might seal a fate. And every stolen moment of sisterhood offers fragile solace against relentless power. You swallow the last of your sherbet and steel your spine. The chain will tighten again. Shackles or privileges may await. But survival depends on keeping your eyes open and your spirit sharper than any blade. You turn from the pavilion, the morning sun dazzling off gilded domes, and trudge onward to the next stage of ordeal. The world of the harem beckons. Here, as in every step, life is brutal, beauty is bargaining, and hope is the rarest treasure of all. You're herded through the pavilion's heavy velvet drapes into a vast chamber that looks more like a luxurious prison than a safe haven. The scent of jasmine oil and roasting lamb hangs thick in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of fear. You probably didn't expect your first full day in the harem to begin with a ritual that feels equal parts welcome and warning. So before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stumble forward alongside a dozen wide-eyed newcomers, girls plucked from Anatolia, Circassia, and even distant Sudan, each clutching the silk wraps they were handed moments ago. Mainstream historians note that these arrival rituals were designed to assert the Sultan's absolute authority, transforming children into possessions of the palace with no recourse to family or faith. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies were largely symbolic or enforced with genuine cruelty. But standing here under the cold glare of a dozen chandeliers, it feels hardly symbolic. A line of ornate brass basins filled with rosewater and saffron-infused milk stands before you. You kneel on the plush carpets, trembling as a stern attendant pours the perfumed liquid over your hands. The warmth seeps into your chilled skin. A fleeting comfort before you're ushered to the next station. A prankish thought flits through your mind. Imagine dumping lukewarm yogurt on the overseer's feet. Instant chaos. You suppress the laugh. Mischief in a palace rarely ends well. Next, you're led to a row of silver mirrors, each framed in carved ivory. Senior odalisques stand by, their coal-lined eyes reflecting your terrified face back at you. They adjust your headscarf, weave it into intricate folds, and examine your hairstyle for any stray locks. A fringe theory holds that some women secretly used herbs to color their hair in forbidden hues, emerald green or midnight blue, though mainstream scholarship regards these tales as fanciful. Still, you catch a whiff of rosemary on your neighbor's curls and wonder if she's taken that risk. Once coiffed, you're directed to a low marble platform where syrups of honey and clotted cream are rubbed onto your arms and neck in a cleansing massage. You wince as someone presses thyme-scented oil into your shoulders. It stings just enough to remind you that nothing here is entirely gentle. Whispered rumors claim that some massage oils contained mildly narcotic poppy extracts to render newcomers more compliant, a practice historians still debate given the lack of chemical analyses in palace archives. After the massage comes the silence test. You're seated on ornate cushions and instructed to remain absolutely still and mute for 10 minutes. No fidgeting. No breathing too audibly. A single breath out of turn earns a sharp rap on the back of your hand with a thin silver rod. You picture that rod as a hypnotic tuning fork, its crack echoing in the marbled hall. To pass the test is to prove you can endure boredom and fear alike. Failing means you become an example for the next group of frightened girls. As the seconds crawl by, you focus on the intricate patterns in the carpet, floral arabesques that seem to shift beneath your gaze. A stray tendril catches your sleeve, and you fight the urge to brush it away. 3 minutes in, you feel your pulse hammering in your neck. 5 minutes, a bead of sweat drips into your collar. 9 minutes, your thoughts are a chaotic whirlwind. Home, family, freedom, but discipline holds you still. When 10 minutes finally end, you nearly collapse in relief, only to be prodded forward before you can savor a single breath. The final trial, a whispered vow of silence. Each newcomer kneels before the matron of ceremonies, an adorned woman who radiates authority in heavy gold bracelets and ruby-studded robes. You bow your head as the matron intones, "By the Sultan's decree, you are ours, your voice, your will, your life." You mimic her solemn tone, the words tasting like ash on your tongue. Fringe scholars debate whether this vow had binding legal force or was purely ceremonial. But here, penury of voice feels as inescapable as iron chains, with the vow spoken. A hush falls so deep you could hear a jeweled slipper hit the marble. The matron's eyes flash approval, and she signals the eunuchs to remove your chains. At last, you stand free of iron but trapped by promise. You catch your reflection briefly in a flanking mirror, hair nearly pinned by saffron threads, cheeks flushed with oil and fear, eyes wide as a startled gazelle's. A sardonic thought surfaces. At least you're still breathing. You're led away by a eunuch whose silent presence looms larger than the gold-trimmed doors you pass. The palace beyond stretches labyrinthine into shadow and whisper. You swallow hard, ricocheting between dread and fascination, realizing this initiation was not an end but the thin veil between girlhood and your new life inside these walls. as you step into a corridor lined with violet silk and under the watch of hidden spies. You remind yourself, you survived arrival and initiation, but in the harem, every breath forward is another ritual, another test of obedience and endurance. The velvet curtains part before you, ushering you deeper into the Sultan's world. The echoes of your vows still hang in the air, a silent tether to your lost past, and a grim promise for the days ahead. You step into a vast, columned hall, whose ceilings soar like the Sultan's ambitions, and immediately the rigid pecking order snaps into focus, the hierarchy and ranks of the harem, an invisible ladder carved deeper into your flesh with every breath. Below the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, the true power behind the throne, stand the Kadın Efendis, the Sultan's legal consorts, each more fiercely protected than the last. You're nowhere near their circle. Instead, you shuffle alongside the odalisks, dreamers of silk and sorrow, your status stamped on every thread of your robe. First come the Iqbals, favored beauties granted private rooms but still subject to whims and caprices. You eye their gilded slippers as they glide past on polished marble, clutching silver goblets of sherbet without a tremor of fear. A fringe theory claims some Iqbals were secretly eunuchs in disguise. Trained to deflect suspicion, historians still argue whether such bold impersonations ever occurred. You glance at their flawless hands and wonder if those hands have never touched constraint. Below them, the Gözde hold only a flicker of hope, a spotlight of favoritism that may burn out with the Sultan's next glance. You remember yesterday's girl, chosen at random from her tears and pollen-stained hair. She might become Gözde or vanish entirely. A mainstream fact, the Gözde enjoyed privileges like private tutoring, yet they remained under constant threat of displacement. You swallow at the thought of sleeping beneath another's bed cover, replaced in an instant. Next in line are the Kariye, the general concubines whose names you'll never learn, their fates sealed by genealogists who track every child born of higher ranks. You join them in their repetitive drills, dance, music, language, but never in their clandestine whispers. Some Kariye plotted alliances to press their sisters toward favor. Others fell into secret depression so deep they emerged only to bear children. Rumors swirl about a secret society of Kariye who exchanged love letters hidden in loom baskets, a practice historians still debate as myth or reality. At the very bottom lie the Kariye newbie, new arrivals like you, untrained, untested, and ungroomed by palace standards. Your bedding is a rough reed mat, theirs are plush divans. Your chambers are damp alcoves, theirs scented suites by the golden horn. You clean their mirrors as they study their reflections, a daily kiss of their perfect faces to your shame. A prank floats through your cracked lips. Imagine polishing those ornate mirrors with mud instead of cloth. Instant chaos. You smother the thought. Mud on a mirror may cost your life here. Eunuch gatekeepers patrol the thresholds between ranks, their eyes sharper than Turkish steel. At each doorway, a eunuch's nod or frown determines your passage. No permission slip, no formal notice, just a silent sign. Fail to bow correctly, and you're cast down the hierarchy for weeks, forced to sleep in drafty corridors. Fringe whispers claim some eunuchs accepted bribes to lower gates for favored Kariye, a scandalous claim historians still dispute, given the secrecy of palace records. You sense the Valide Sultan's presence like gravity in this hall, an aura of authority so immense it bends the air. Her statuesque portrait looms above, the canvas shimmering with painted pearls. To ascend these ranks is to escape your past, to trade chains for satin, but to fall is to risk disappearing into the dungeon-like quarters beyond the silver-grilled gates. There, women whispered, rotted away in darkness, consumed by silence. Your heart pounds when a Kadın Efendi sweeps by, her escort of eunuchs parting the crowd like waves before a prow. She wears a gown blazing with emerald threads, enough to blind anyone's ambitions. A Karye flinches at her passing, and you steady her, murmuring comfort. Solidarity among those deemed lowliest becomes your lifeline. You share stolen morsels of grape syrup and exchange sympathetic bows when the higher ranks turn blind eyes. At midday, you're herded to the central courtyard for a public demonstration of ranking, a dance of power and precision. The Iqbals shimmer in circle near the fountain, their steps fluid as water. The Gozda move behind them, perfecting the harem's signature swirl. You hover at the back with the Karye, hips aching from repetition, face burning beneath the noon sun. Each misstep draws a hiss from the crowd. A well-placed slip could demote you from Karye to cook's assistant, a fate whispered to be worse than confinement. An overseer's bark slices through the music. Form ranks. You shuffle into lines by sash color and ruffled veil design, your breath hitching as the eunuchs inspect your alignment. The slightest gap between ranks is a crime against order, a missed step a scar against your record. You ignore the burn in your calves, forcing precision with the obsession of survival. When the music ends, the Valida Sultan's envoy strides forward, handing reminders of rank, jewels for Iqbals, perfume vials for Gozda, simple ribbons for Karye. You receive nothing but a curt nod, your eyes fixed on the distant jeweled collar offered to a newly promoted Iqbal. 3 of her fellow concubines fall to their knees in gratitude. One weeps openly, her tears bright as rubies on her velvet gown. You averted your gaze. Tears in public are taboo unless drowning in favor, as the crowd disperses. A fellow Karye whispers a sad joke, "At least we always know our place." You snort quietly, the sound lost in the swarm of silk and sandalwood. Below the polished marble floor, the harem's underbelly simmers with quiet fury and unspoken dreams. Each rank is a step on a ladder that can collapse without warning. Shaking off the late morning's dazzle and dread, you trudge back to your quarters, passing threshold after threshold manned by silent eunuchs. Your rank grants you no keys, only permission to polish the flying carpets and sweep the guardian lanterns. As you kneel by the low doorway and set to work, you lift your gaze to the painted ceiling, a fresco of celestial dancers, forever spinning in perfect alignment. The irony isn't lost on you. Even the heavens have their hierarchy. You finish dusting and rise, shoulders stiff, longing for your feet to be unshackled. Tomorrow brings the next test of rank, lessons in protocol, whispered secrets for climbing the social scaffolding. But for now, you survive by knowing precisely where you stand, at the very bottom, gazing up at a world of power and privilege you may never touch. Yet you cling to hope that your next step, one flawless courtesy, one stolen glance from grace, might inch you higher on the Sultan's glittering ladder. You trudge through the labyrinthine corridors of the harem, your fingers trailing along silken tapestries depicting royal hunts and celestial charts, until you arrive at the heart of your daily torment, the classrooms of courtly grace. Here, under the watchful gaze of stern tutors, you'll master music, dance, and etiquette, an endless procession of tasks designed to sculpt you into the Sultan's ideal companion. You probably thought music lessons were relaxing. Spoiler alert, here, every misplayed note might cost you a rank. First up is the oud lesson, seated cross-legged on a velvet cushion beside a low brass lamp. The oud's pear-shaped body gleams under the lamp's glow, its strings taut like the nerves along your spine. An accomplished musician, once a child prodigy, you've heard, sits across from you, silver hair tied back. He demonstrates an intricate riff in immediately alien time signatures, his fingers a blur. Mainstream sources note the oud's prominence in Ottoman court music dates to the 16th century, when blind minstrel Yusuf Dede popularized it among elite circles. Historians still argue whether improvisation or strict composition dominated palace performances. But here, your tutor insists on rote perfection. One wrong pluck earns a sharp tap on your knuckles with a thin ebony ruler. Your hands hover over the strings as you attempt the riff. The oud, smooth wood feels comforting, an ironic contrast to your pounding heart. You pluck one note, then two, fumbling the third. The tutor's eyelids narrow. He pauses, lifts his ruler, and raps your knuckle once. The sting is brief, but lingers. A physical echo that reminds you this is not a gentle art studio. You nod quickly, forcing a grateful smile, and repeat the riff until you hollow note it with trembling precision. Next, you're ushered to the dance chamber, a mirrored hall lined with artfully arranged cushions and potted jasmine. The floor's marble tiles glide cool against your bare feet. A graceful instructor in layered silks beckons. Today's routine is the muwashsha, a swirling rhythmic dance mimicking the curves of Arabic poetry. Mainstream chronicles credit Andalusian refugees for introducing muwashsha to Ottoman courts. Blending Iberian flair with Eastern poise, fringe accounts whisper that some dancers secreted ornate daggers in their garters, tiny blades to punctuate dramatic spins, but scholars still debate how common those dramatic flourishes truly were. You position yourself beside a dozen fellow carriers, each in pastel tunics embroidered with gold thread. The instructor counts out the rhythm, a steady dum-tech, and you lift your arms gracefully, then pivot your hips. For a heartbeat, you feel weightless, but on the second pivot, your foot slips ever so slightly, and you stumble. The instructor's gaze sears you like sunlight. She pauses, stern, then instructs you to repeat the entire routine from the top, barely pausing for breath until your balance is impeccable. As you spin again, your muscles burn like fireflies, but you drive yourself onward, determined not to falter again. After dance comes etiquette, the art of bowing and serving. You kneel before a life-sized porcelain dinner service, cobalt plates inlaid with silver, delicate rosewater glasses. A tutor demonstrates how to present the sweets plate to a hypothetical Qadin Effendi, lowering your torso at precisely a 45-degree angle while holding the platter level. A single wobble could spill treasured locum and earn you days of kitchen duty. Mainstream etiquette manuals from palace archives describe nearly 50 distinct bow variations, each tailored to a specific rank. Historians still argue whether women memorized all 50 or only the few relevant to their daily duties. But here, failure to execute any bow flawlessly is treated as a personal affront to the Sultan himself. You stand, plate in hand, and perform the bow. Your knees creak, your back hums in protest. You hold the bow, head bowed, gaze fixed on the plate's brim. The tutor nods, but then shakes her head when she notices your fingers aren't perfectly aligned beneath the platter. You lift and lower again, wrists aching, until your angles are mathematically exact as you stand. Plate shimmering, a small knot of pride flutters in your chest. You've passed another trial. Your final lesson is language and poetry, held in a private alcove where moonlight filters through latticed windows. A poetess, once famed for her ghazals, recites lines of flowing verse about love's agony and ecstasy. You learn to pronounce each word, feeling the syllables roll off your tongue like pearls on silk. Mainstream texts laud women's mastery of Persian and Ottoman Turkish poetry as crucial for courtly discourse. Historians still debate whether these poetic lessons cultivated genuine appreciation or merely trained women to recite when called. But as you whisper "A dil a can" under your breath, you discover a flicker of real beauty in the words. When the session ends, you emerge with fingers stained by ink and body humming with exertion. You've covered music, dance, etiquette, and poetry, all in a single dawn-to-dusk marathon. Your limbs ache, your mind buzzes with theories of composition versus improvisation, Andalusian influence versus Ottoman innovation, legend versus record. Each lesson blends artistry and authoritarianism, showing you that, in this gilded world, creativity is only as safe as your ability to endure pain and praise alike. As you shuffle away from the classrooms, you recall crocodile dung sunscreen from that first day, another quirky resilience tip that left your skin strangely soothed. Here, in the polished halls of courtly grace, your trials are no less brutal but wrapped in beauty and ritual. You tuck these lessons into your memory like talismans, a perfect pluck, a flawless pivot, a poetic murmur, all proof you can survive the harem's relentless schooling. You step into the wardrobe chamber, a jewel box of wardrobes, perfumed mist rising like morning fog. Silks hang from gilded racks, jeweled turbans rest on velvet cushions, and crystal bottles of attar sparkle beneath lantern light. This is fashion, fragrance and finery at its most merciless. Here, every garment and scent is both a blessing and a chain, an adornment that binds you ever tighter to palace expectations. You probably thought clothes only warmed you. Spoiler alert, here, they shape your destiny and your suffering. First, you approach a rack of kaftans, each heavier than the last. The finest are woven with gold thread spun in Bursa. Mainstream records confirm the city's 16th century looms produced cloth fit for emperors. Historians still argue whether these fabrics were originally exported for private use or commissioned exclusively for top-ranked harem women. But here, you know the weight bears a hidden price, a constant, unrelenting pressure on your shoulders. You slip into one such kaftan, its sleeves brushing your fingertips, sunlight dancing off metallic threads. Almost immediately, the metal filaments tug at your skin, chafing with each breath as if reminding you you're never free. Next, you're handed a pair of jeweled slippers, so inlaid with emeralds and pearls they gleam like trapped stars. A fringe account claims some slippers contained secret compartments for poison vials, an invention that either underscores brilliance or paranoia. A debate still alive among scholars. You slip them on and wobble. The soles are firm and unyielding, forcing your toes into pointed defiance. Each step forward throbbed in your arches like a muted drum, proving that opulence often marches hand in hand with pain. Turning a corner, you enter the fragrance gallery. Rows of alabaster jars hold rosewater distilled from damascene petals, musk harvested from Himalayan deer, and ambergris plucked from drifting whales, an exotic inventory fit for sultans. Mainstream sources note that Ottoman perfumers refined rose attar into complex blends by the 17th century, creating scents that lingered for days. Historians still debate whether these fragrances functioned more as status markers or practical repellents against pests. But as you inhale a drop of musk oil, you know one thing: the aroma cloaks you in allure, even as it reminds you of the mucky stables where the scent was first tested. An attendant dabs a tiny amount of amber-infused paste behind each ear. The cold stickiness startles you, then warms, merging with your body heat into a heady perfume that stirs dizzy thoughts, pleasant and unsettling in equal measure. A whispered tip reaches your ear. Some women added ground sandalwood to the blend, believing it sharpened memory during political intrigue sessions. Fringe herbalists claim the combination induced mild trance states. Mainstream chemists remain skeptical without chemical analyses. Regardless of fact or fancy, you feel your senses heighten, each breath a cocktail of sweetness and power. Now comes the headgear, turbans crowned with ostrich plumes, encrusted with rubies and lapis lazuli. You lower a heavy velvet turban onto your brow, feeling its coils tighten around your skull. The weight presses your temples into a constant reminder of rank and decorum. Your head must remain erect, your gaze unflinching. A single misplacement, too low, too high, too skewed, could invite ridicule or rebuke. Yet wearing it correctly signals that you belong here, however painfully. An overseer glides in, inspecting each turban's angle and height. He murmurs in your ear, straight line, no tilt. You stand ramrod straight, neck aching, mind buzzing with the scent of roses and resin. The overseer's approving nod feels like a reprieve, brief, fragile, before you're next handed a sash embroidered with silver thread and pearls. Tying it around your waist cinches your curves but constricts your breathing. Each press of the cord a lesson in endurance. Finally, you're offered jewelry, bangles the width of your forearm, necklaces so heavy they press into your collarbone, earrings that tug at your lobes like whispered threats. Each piece glitters with a promise, you are chosen. But each piece also hums its curse, never forget you are bound. Mainstream treasure inventories confirm that palace jewelers kept meticulous logs of gems, but historians still debate their sources: African mines, Caucasian glens, or Silk Road traders. Here, any speculation is academic. Every gem on your skin carries its own history and weight. With your ensemble complete, you exit into the inner courtyard. The afternoon sun catches your silks and jewels, fracturing light into dancing prisms on marble walls. Fellow couriers pause to gape or recoil, admiration and envy etched across their faces. You walk among them like a living chandelier, each movement lit by reflected brilliance. But each step also sends a pulse of pain through your ankles, ribs and temples, reminders that beauty's price is as paid in your flesh. As you reach your workshop for the next lesson or punishment, you notice the reflection of your opulent self in a polished copper basin. Your face is framed by silks and pearls, eyes wide with wonder and dread. You touch the amber paste behind your ear, feeling the cool residue mingle with sweat. In that moment, you understand. In the harem, fashion and fragrance are weapons of both attraction and control, tools that bind you as surely as any chain. You tuck a stray jewel into your sash and steady your posture for the ordeal ahead. Opulence surrounds you, yet you carry its weight like armor, shining, seductive, and painful. Each garment, each drop of attar, each glint of gemstone is a thread in the tapestry of subjugation you wear willingly for survival. As you step toward the next chamber, you whisper a sardonic thanks. At least you smell amazing. You shuffle down a lantern-lit corridor lined with carved cedar panels until a pair of heavily guarded doors looms before you. Beyond them lies the domain of the eunuchs and gatekeepers. These corridors don't echo with laughter or music, but with the soft scrape of leather boots and the click of metal keys. A perpetual reminder that you're always watched. You probably thought eunuchs were kindly old custodians. Spoiler alert, here, they're the ultimate arbiters of life and death. So before you lose your nerve, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slip inside, the scent of rosewater mingling with the faint tang of iron. Two eunuchs, tall, silent, and impossibly still, stand at attention. Their hairless scalps gleam under the lamps. Their eyes, ringed with coal, flicker only to catch your form. Mainstream accounts confirm that palace eunuchs were often entrusted with confidential duties and wielded more power than many high-ranking officials. Historians still argue whether their influence was a deliberate strategy by sultans to prevent dynastic plots or an unintended consequence of isolating these men from family ties. But you know one thing, cross them at your peril. The lead eunuch, his build solid as a fortress wall, steps forward and extends a slender keyring. He unlocks a heavy bronze grate with a single, fluid motion, a process that seems less about security and more a ritual of domination. You pause on the threshold, heart hammering, as the gate swings open. Beyond lies a courtyard so silent that your own breath sounds like a drumbeat. Marble paving stones, slick with rosewater, reflect your trembling silhouette. At the courtyard's center, an octagonal pavilion rises on a platform. This is the chamber of restricted passages, where eunuchs regulate every step you take. Each entrance and exit is logged in a towering ledger kept by an attendant eunuch who wields a goosequill pen with delicate precision. Fringe sources claim some eunuchs used secret ciphers to conceal illicit rendezvous or unrecorded atrocities. Mainstream scholars still debate the extent of this hidden ledger, but here you see columns upon columns of names, dates, and destinations scribbled in elegant Arabic script. You present your token of rank, a small clay seal stamped this morning by the matron of ceremonies, and the attendant eunuch nods and clicks his tongue. You step forward. As the gates close behind you with a dull thud, you realize you're now in the crucible of surveillance, a vast, seemingly empty space where only the eunuch's shadows move. A second pair of eunuchs glides toward you from opposite sides of the pavilion. They wear lighter tunics but carry long, slender rods tipped with copper wire, implements rumored to test the truth of one's bowing, a brief, shocking jolt if you bow too deeply or not deeply enough. Scholars still debate whether these truth rods were widely used or relegated to rumor, but your memory of a girl last week yelping beneath a rod's crack tells you they're more than legend. You navigate a series of engraved marble steps, each carved with inscriptions indicating precise foot placement for different ranks. Misstep by a single half-inch, and you're liable for public admonishment or forfeiture of privileges. The eunuchs watch your feet as closely as they watch your face, their unspoken verdicts shaping your fate. Midway through, a whisper drifts across the courtyard. She passed without hesitation. A favored Iqbal glides past, escorted by eunuchs, her robes barely brushing the floor. Privilege permits her swift passage. Your lower rank condemns you to the slow, measured crawl. Yet even her freedom is relative. No door remains open to her for long. At the far end, you arrive at a second grate, this one leading to the inner sanctum where you'll spend your day. The lead eunuch unlocks it with a silent flourish, and you step through. The door closes behind you, and a hush envelops your shoulders like a cloak. In here, the only sound is the soft rasp of the eunuch's breathing and the distant drip of water from fountain basins. As you move toward your assigned suite, you notice subtle signs of eunuch care: polished bronze rails, finely carved wooden handholds, and discreet lamps dropping a gentle glow on each threshold. These details reveal that eunuchs cared for every comfort while enforcing every rule. Tales persist that some eunuchs would sneak gentle herbs into chamomile for favored concubines to ease their anxiety. Historians still debate whether such acts of kindness were sanctioned or clandestine rebellions. You pass a side chamber where a eunuch kneels at an ornate washstand, his fingers poised to draw water for a favored Gozda's ablutions. His devotion is palpable. Each pour is precise, each used towel folded just so elsewhere. You glimpse another eunuch escorting a trembling carrier to kneel before the Valida Sultan. The eunuch's grip on her elbow is firm, comforting or coercive. You cannot tell. Finally, you arrive at your destination, a modest alcove patched with embroidered hangings and a small inlaid wooden chest holding your modest belongings. A pair of eunuchs nod once, silent guardians who won't smile, won't speak, but whose vigilance wards off both real threats and imagined ones. You cross the threshold, and the main grate swings shut, sealing you in. You let out a long breath, tasting the faintly floral air of the courtyard you've just left. The eunuchs have delivered you safely through restricted passages, yet their presence lingers on your skin like residue, proof that here, freedom is granted step by cautious step and always subject to recall. You drop onto your reed mat, back pressed against cool marble, and realize the eunuchs are both architects of your confinement and its unwitting comforters. Outside your alcove, the eunuchs return to their silent vigil, pens scratching ledgers, keys jangling like distant rain. In their control lies your world, corridors of beauty and brutality, where every passage is a measured gift. You close your eyes, feeling the subtle shift of marble beneath you, reminding you that in this gilded palace, even the stones obey the eunuch's watchful silence. You're herded through a low, arched doorway into the kitchen courtyard, an amphitheater of copper cauldrons, steam-choked air, and the relentless clatter of knives on chopping blocks, the aroma of cardamom, roasting lamb, and simmering pilaf hits you like a freight train of flavor. But don't be fooled. This feast of sensual delights conceals its own brand of cruelty. In the Ottoman harem's grand kitchens, you're not just feeding bodies, you're feeding politics, intrigue, and survival. First, you navigate between towering cauldrons, each large enough to bathe in, where cooks ladle out pilafs studded with currants and pine nuts. Mainstream sources confirm that the imperial kitchens at Topkapi employed over 1,000 staffers working in shifts to produce upward of 50 distinct dishes per meal. Historians still argue whether these vast culinary operations prioritized variety for the Sultan's pleasure or functioned as a display of imperial power. But here, you see both spectacle and strategy fermented together like sour yogurt. A cook thrusts a copper tray toward you, piled high with stuffed eggplants swimming in a pomegranate molasses reduction and draped in ribbons of caramelized onion. The sauce's ruby sheen glints like blood in the lantern light, an oddly poetic reminder that many of these ingredients, pomegranates, deep crimson, symbolize both life and sacrifice in Persian poetry. Fringe legends claim some chefs crushed pearls into their sauces to impress visiting envoys, an extravagant rumor scholars still debate given the scarcity of such gems in dietary records. But what you taste is real pomegranate, tangy and bittersweet, staining your lips a prehistoric red. Next, you approach the cold buffet where rosewater-scented pastries and chilled milk puddings beckon. The pudding, known as muhallebi, is said to be made with buffalo milk prized for its richness, though mainstream dairying records from the 17th century suggest cow's milk was more commonly used. Buffalo herds being largely relegated to rural estates. Historians still dispute how often buffalo milk reached palace tables, but your spoon scoops up thick, silken cream flavored with saffron, so costly it's called red gold. You grin at the thought of paying dinner in threads of saffron, then grit your teeth when the cook jabs your elbow with a wooden spoon, reminding you that dessert here is no freebie. At a sizzling grill, lamb kebabs hiss as fat drips onto hot coals. You lean in to catch a whiff of the smoky char, dreaming of stealing a skewer when no one's looking. Yet you remember last week's girl who tried that stunt, only to find her hand branded with a heated poker as punishment. Tough crowd. You bite back a chuckle, remembering her howls echoing through palace corridors. A little sticky finger humor never hurt anyone except, apparently, sticky fingers. Overhead, a line of copper pans collects bubbling yogurt-based sauces infused with garlic and mint. The attendants move with balletic precision. One pours, another stirs, a third pauses to taste and nod, each action choreographed to feed the harem's hundreds within moments. Fringe culinary historians claim these sauces sometimes contained opium tinctures to calm overworked concubines. Mainstream sources, lacking chemical analyses, remain skeptical. But as you nibble a bit of the garlicky blend, you swear you feel a gentler hum in your veins. Whether that's opium or rosewater-laced placebo is anyone's guess. Beyond the sauces, an attendant rolls out a wooden cart piled with dates so glossy they could masquerade as polished amber beads. She offers you one, cautioning it's not for stealing. Funny how the sweetest fruits carry the strictest rules. You pop the tender flesh into your mouth, sweetness exploding across your tongue. and nearly close your eyes in bliss, until a stern eunuch's gaze pins you in place. A living cautionary display. Even paradise has guards. You swallow quickly, masking your euphoria before it becomes an excuse for misbehavior. Suddenly, an overseer's whistle shrieks, a call to dietary inspection. Cooks vanish like magicians. Dishes vanish from counters, and you're corralled before a long table where the head steward stands with ledger and quill. Each silver bowl is checked for perfect portioning, too much rice, and you're rumored to face a day of forced fasting under lash. Too little stew, and you're denied entry to afternoon lessons. Whispered tales speak of women who fainted mid-inspection, only to awaken shackled to oven stokes, fanning the coals until they begged for release. Scholars still debate the veracity of those accounts, for official logs remain tight-lipped on humiliations unfit for the Sultan's chronicles. You present your bowl of lamb stew and pilaf. The steward tastes a deliberate spoonful, then nods, approval confined to a single blink. You exhale, heart pounding, as a carrier next to you freezes. Her tray bears a stray grape stuck to the side, a punishable oversight. She's sent to the kitchen dungeon to scrub cauldrons until her nails bleed. You brace, remembering to wipe every crumb from your plate, every smear from your lips. In this culinary crucible, cleanliness is as vital as hunger. After inspection, the kitchens settle back into controlled chaos. Steam curls along the rafters, pots clang, and vigorous stirring resumes. You snag a final bite of fragrant rice before being led away, the scent of saffron and lamb lingering in your hair like gilded smoke. Your belly, once hollow with anticipation, now pulses with the weight of seasoned rice and soaked raisins. As you depart, a cook sneaks you a small parcel of leftover flatbread wrapped in lettuce leaves, an illicit gift that feels like contraband joy. You press it to your chest, a secret stash against the next long drill. The cook winks, then disappears into the crowd of busy prepare-everything-on-demand staffers. With your makeshift lunch snug against your sash, you trudge toward the next ordeal, dance, politics, or more etiquette drills. Who knows? But for now, you carry the scattered spoils of the harem's lavish diet. Each morsel a reminder that even in forced luxury, sustenance can be subversive, a small rebellion of appetite. You step out of the kitchen's haze into sunlit corridors, cherry-red pomegranate stains still on your fingertips. Ahead awaits the ritual of ritual dinners, or worse, the Sultan's random midnight snacks. Yet armed with stolen bread and a head full of spice-laced daydreams, you feel ready to face the next craving for power, praise, and peril. The harem's feast may be a gilded cage, but every stolen flavor is a morsel of freedom. You trudge back toward the mirrored dance hall, your calves still humming from yesterday's courtly drills, only to find yourself plunged into the ruthless ballet of whispers and glances. Welcome to the harem's secret war, whispers of rivalry. A covert battlefield where every smile is a stratagem and every compliment a veiled threat. You probably thought palace life was all lush gardens and lullabies. Spoiler alert, it's more like knife fights in silk slippers. Before you lean in to eavesdrop on your rivals, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's whispered conspiracies together. You slip inside the grand hall, a cavern of marble floors and gilded mirrors reflecting scores of veiled figures clustering in tight-knit circles. The air smells of rosewater and tension. Mainstream court records from the 18th century confirm that harem women formed factions based on shared origins, Circassian beauties with fellow mountain girls, Bosnians leaning on Bosnians, each group leveraging collective influence to gain the Sultan's favor. Historians still argue whether these cliques wielded real power or remained informal gossip clubs. But here, You feel the electric buzz of alliances crackling beneath the chandeliers, like hidden sparks in a velvet-lined box. You drift toward a trio of favored Iqbals standing beneath a fresco of dancing cherubs. One murmurs to another, her voice a silken thread. The Sultan's eye lingered on Layla, longer than usual last night. A third Iqbal tilts back her head, lips curved into a sly smile. You catch the joke, an unspoken bet on who'll capture the Sultan's next glance, and hide a chuckle. It's like celebrity gossip, Ottoman style, only with higher stakes than box office sales. Your own lips twitch, hopefully. No one sees. Nearby, a group of Carrier huddle around a faded tapestry. One whispers, "I heard the second Khadan Effendi's health is failing. Coughing blood," they say. Another arches an eyebrow. Poor thing, without her influence, her protégés will starve for scraps. Fringe tales claim such rumors sometimes led to actual poisoning. Tiny doses of arsenic slipped into sherbet cups, though mainstream scholars note a lack of forensic evidence in palace medical logs. Still, as you watch their eyes glitter, you imagine hidden vials clinking in embroidered pouches. You glide along the hall's edge, careful to seem engrossed in the tiled mosaics arabesques. In truth, you're decoding body language. The stiffening shoulders of a gozda when a favored Iqbal passes, the quick brush of a hand across a wrist, the strategic cough that draws attention away from a stolen glance. A joke flits through your mind. This place has more subplots than a slightly tipsy scribe's notebook, but you stifle it. In the harem, even laughter can become ammunition. A eunuch glides by, his presence like a silent gavel. He pauses, cocking his head, as if listening to the hushed conversations. Rivalries freeze for a heartbeat. No one wants to be the one caught discussing another woman's downfall. You feel your pulse quicken, though you know the eunuch's role is to enforce decorum, not clan politics. Once he moves on, the whispers reawaken like a freshly ignited hearth. Along the far wall, a pair of veteran Carrier trade urgent words. One says, "Tomorrow's ceremony will honor the Valide Sultan's name day. 3 crowns to be placed, 1 for each favored Khadan Effendi. Will your sister-in-alliance secure one?" The other's lips twist in a smile. "Stand by me, and we'll each claim a crown, and maybe unseat a rival or two." You note the subtle use of sister, a coded reference to their secret pact. Whisper networks are woven with myth and promise. Historians still debate whether any oath-bound sisterhood truly existed, or if they're fanciful reconstructs based on scattered references. You tuck that thought away, focusing on their conspiratorial energy. Suddenly the eunuch's whistle blasts, a signal that the Sultan's midday inspection is imminent. Rivalries pivot into performance. Each cluster dissolves, and women straighten their posture, patting down pleats and smoothing veils. The Iqbals drift to the center floor, preparing a graceful curtsy. The gozda hover at the edges, anxious not to be overlooked. The Carrier slump back, resigned to anonymity. Even you adjust your sash, straighten your shoulders, and repurpose your own tension into a poised bow. In the harem's theater of power, control of every movement can tip the balance between promotion and disregard. When the inspection ends, the rivals reconvene under the dim glow of lanterns. A candlestick bearer, a lowly attendant, has overheard some illicit whispers and offers to broker communication, an unexpected pawn in this social chess game. You note the candlestick bearer's tentative glance and realize even attendants can exploit factional rivalries. Scholars still debate whether slave attendants ever swayed harem politics in meaningful ways. But here, you witness the possibility as he slips coded messages wrapped in scraps of gold leaf paper. You pivot to escape the mounting pressure and enter a side alcove draped in sapphire blue hangings. A handful of newcomers cling to each other, eyes wide with fear and fascination. You force a reassuring smile and murmur, "Stick close. Learn the game fast. There's no time to weep. They tuck their blankets around their shoulders. One timidly asks, if it's true the Sultan personally judges which group of Carrier gets new garments each season. You nod gravely. It is never underestimate the importance of a new robe. They inhale sharply, realizing that fabric can be as vital as fate in these corridors. A half-hidden candelabra casts quivering shadows, and you spy a small parchment fluttering behind it, the work of an earlier conspirator, a coded map of favored and outcast women, marking safe passage routes through the palace. You reach out to touch it, hesitation gripping you. Using such intelligence is risky, but information is survival in the harem. Fringe research suggests some maps guided escape attempts, though mainstream accounts deny any successful breakout. You tuck the parchment into your sleeve, a secret tool in your arsenal. Resolute, you slip back into the main hall, merging into a cluster of whisperers. You feed them a rumor of a pending feast cancellation. If true, the ensuing chaos could displace distrusted rivals and allow you to collect favors from frantic cohorts. Your heart pounds as the gossip takes root. You watch as Aguzda's eyes narrow in concern and Akadan Effendi's lips purse in exasperation. Mission accomplished. A subtle shift of power executed with nothing more than words. As midnight approaches, the harem falls into hush. Rivalries simmer like embers awaiting a spark. You settle by a fountain's quiet drip, reflecting moonlight off its marble lip. The laughter and plotting fade to distant echoes. You inhale the night air heavy with jasmine and intrigue, feeling that despite your low rank, you've carved out a place in the palace's social war in this world. Alliances can elevate you to privileged balconies or ostracize you to hidden dungeons. Compassion is a liability, deception a necessity. Still, you cling to the thrill, outmaneuvering rivals, planting rumors, forging alliances, and balancing on the razor's edge between triumph and oblivion. Each whispered word is both a weapon and a shield, a fragile thread in the harem's intricate tapestry of power. You rise as the first call to prayer echoes from distant minarets, the harem's nightly lullaby. Tomorrow, new factions will emerge, new loyalties tested. But for now, you savor this fleeting victory in the shadows, your heart alight with the knowledge that in the harem's deadly dance, your voice, once silenced, can become the knife edge that shapes destinies. You shuffle into the vast throne hall, an opulent cathedral of marble floors inlaid with mother-of-pearl, gilded arches soaring overhead, and stained glass windows filtering daylight into jeweled patterns on the walls. Your silken slippers whisper against the cold stone, each step a test of posture and nerve. This morning's ceremony is the Sultan's visit, a ritual as coveted as it is terrifying. Imagine sunbeams slicing through haze of amber incense smoke, illuminating clouds drifting above jeweled sashes and trembling hands. You probably thought a royal inspection was a glamorous perk. Spoiler alert. Here, it's a crucible of silent judgment. So before you steel yourself for this ordeal, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's story together. You advance into the hall's center, where the Sultan's raised dais commands the room's focus. Mainstream chronicles record that Sultan Ahmed III inspected his harem twice weekly, using these visits to assess loyalty, reward favor, and reinforce his absolute authority over hundreds of women. Historians still argue whether these visits were political theater orchestrated for court officials or genuine moments of intimacy between ruler and concubines. But as you step forward, you feel both his power and his presence pressing down on you. Arrayed before the dais are the Qadan Effendi, the Sultan's legal consorts, in caftans studded with pearls and emeralds, each embodying an ideal of beauty and decorum. Beneath them stand the Iqbals, Favored concubines granted private rooms and whispered promises, while you, as a guzda, stand 2 ranks back, clutching the folds of your embroidered sash. The air ripples with tension, and the scent of rosewater incense mingled with saffron oil on silk. Each breath carries the faint clink of hidden charms and the unspoken promise of advancement or oblivion. From behind a velvet curtain, the Sultan emerges tall and solemn in a white sable-trimmed robe, his turban crowned with a diamond briolet that catches the lantern light. His approach hushes the hall. Even the eunuchs lower their heads. Fringe anecdotes tell of a sultan who once struck a favorite with his jeweled staff over a misplaced eyelash, while mainstream sources admit only that his moods could shift like lightning over the desert sands. Today, the entire palace seems to bend toward him. He lifts his bejeweled staff in silent command, and the first Kadın Efendi kneels, a gesture of devotion encased in ritual. Her polished nails trace the marble as she recites, "By your grace, my life flows from your mercy." The words roll from her lips with unwavering calm. Even as her chest heaves beneath layers of brocade, you note the tiny quiver in her voice's final syllable, a hint that even the highest ranks tremble. One by one, the consorts ascend the dais. Each curtsy is more elaborate than the last, a smooth sway of the hips learned in yesterday's dance drills, a tilt of the chin shaped by endless etiquette lessons, a measured inhale honed during whispered vows. By the time your name echoes in the hall, your legs feel like damp reeds. You step forward, hands crossed at your waist, gaze fixed on the cold marble. You press your palms together, bow your head until your fingertips graze the floor, and recite the vow taught by the matron. By your power, my breath, by your will, my world. Each word tastes like ash and honey. The Sultan's gaze, a slow sweep of sovereign judgment, settles on you. You feel the weight of his stare tracing the folds of your kaftan, flickering over the amber paste behind your ear, then locking onto your wide eyes. You lock your own gaze, heart racing, wondering if daring to meet his eyes is boldness or blunder. Then, in that frozen moment, he inclines his head just slightly, a gesture so minimal it could be mercy or warning. You bow again, chest tightening with adrenaline, and retreat into the ranks, mind spinning with relief. Next, the Sultan glides among silver platters of delicacies laid before him. Dates glisten like rubies, sherbets fizz with mint and rosewater, and porcelain bowls brim with rice pudding flecked with pistachios. Mainstream etiquette manuals describe this silent sampling as a test of restraint, an exercise in self-control for the women of the harem. Historians still debate whether such samplings actually occurred or were later romanticizations. But here, your pulse drags you toward that jeweled tray of sherbet. You resist the urge to taste, focusing instead on steady breathing and stillness. Behind you, a guzda succumbs, brushing her lips against a date. A eunuch materializes at once, moving like a shadow, and whispers a reprimand. She blanches, curses under her breath, then bows deeply before dissolving back into the crowd. The ease of her reprimand, a whispered admonition, not a lash, feels almost merciful. You wonder if fleeting privilege truly spares you brutality, or if everyone here eventually pays the price for a single slip. The inspection draws to a close as the Sultan inclines his head once more and steps back behind the velvet curtain. The eunuchs snap the curtains closed, and the hall exhales as if it had held its breath for hours. Relief ripples through the ranks. A consort exhales a sigh so soft it sounds like a silk ribbon brushing the floor. Another wipes tears she hoped were unseen. You allow yours to pool at the corners of your eyes, grateful your knees didn't buckle. Exiting the throne hall, you stumble into the corridor's dusky glow. Lanterns flicker, throwing fractured light upon jeweled mosaics and tapestries, heavy with gold thread. Memories of your vows wait, his inscrutable nod, and the hall's whispered hush swirl in your mind like sandstorms. In this gilded cage, the Sultan's visit is both pinnacle and pitfall, an intimate audience with fate itself. As you retrace your steps through silent corridors, you taste rose water on your tongue and feel the faint hum of metallic threads brushing your skin. The vaulted arches echo with distant footfalls and low murmurs. You realize that in the harem's intricate dance, survival depends not just on loyalty or beauty, but on perfect mastery of each gesture and each vow. And now, with your fate sealed in a single nod, you brace yourself for the next performance, eager and terrified, in equal measure. You slip from the Sultan's silken glare into a smaller, lamplit room where the air hums with hushed plotting. Welcome to the realm of political intrigue and power, where harem women bend court politics to their wills, shaping empires from behind velvet screens. Picture narrow corridors echoing with coded footsteps and brocaded whispers, each syllable a dagger aimed at rival factions. You probably thought palace politics belonged to viziers. Spoiler alert, here, concubines wield more power than many ministers. So before you grasp the depth of this clandestine war, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's story together. You enter a private salon scented with amber and myrrh. The Valid Sultan's portrait looms above a carved ebony screen, her eyes shimmering with dynastic ambition. Mainstream chronicles confirm that the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, often ruled the empire in all but name, leveraging the harem's vast network to place loyal candidates in key posts. Historians still argue whether this power was officially sanctioned or an informal consequence of maternal prestige. But here, you feel her presence crackle in the lamp's glow. A Khadan Effendi seated on a divan draped with Persian carpets leans forward. She speaks in a velvet whisper. We must secure the Grand Vizier's loyalty before dawn. His seal on the Edict of Alliances is our safeguard. You nod, heart hammering, through a lattice screen. You glimpse a eunuch exchanging a scroll with a palace clerk, a coded message destined for the vizier's chambers. Every document passing through these hands carries directives that shake the empire's foundations. You pour a cup of piping hot tea, green leaves swirling in boiling water, scented with rose petals, and listen as another voice adds, "The Janissary commander backs our rival. If we fail to outbid him, the troops may revolt." Fringe sources claim some harem women bribed military officers with jewels. Mainstream scholars debate the prevalence of such bribery, citing scant financial records. Yet here, the threat hangs in the air like a thundercloud. Soldiers marching on the palace, swords drawn for a cause beyond the Sultan's bedchamber. Across a low table, a Gozda unfurls a map of the bazaar districts. Control the spice trade routes, and we control the tax farms, she murmurs, tracing a finger along caravan roads. Ottoman tax farming was a lucrative system. Mainstream historians note its importance in state revenue. Yet within the harem, knowledge of revenue flows is a secret weapon. You realize that every dum of tea you sip contains whispers of wealth and war, and that your role here is no mere ornament but part of a vast chessboard. Suddenly, the doors flutter open, and a eunuch glides in bearing a sealed letter embossed with the Sultan's tukra. The Khadan Effendi's hands tremble as she breaks the wax seal. Her eyes scan the decree, a promotion for one faction, demotion for another. Gasps ripple through the room. This is the Sultan's covert intervention, a single missive capable of toppling alliances. You hold your breath as she reads, "By my will, Ibrahim Pasha assumes command of the naval fleet. All dissenters shall heed his orders." The naval fleet is a cornerstone of Ottoman power. Mainstream sources praise its might. so shifting its command is a masterstroke. Historians still debate whether such edicts were common or exceptional displays of favoritism. A murmur arises. Ibrahim Pasha owes his position to the favored Iqbal, our ally. Smiles bloom like rare flowers as the room's balance shifts. You exchange glances with your partners. Alliances must reconfigure at once. Every alliance here is a living thing, fragile and perishable as blossoms in the desert sun. One moment you're united, the next, you jockey for new favors, reshaping bonds as easily as you smooth a silken sash. One of the carrier produces a small chest of gold coins, pouring them into a velvet pouch. "For the captain's guards," she whispers. Bribes flow through even the harem's inner sanctum, a necessary lubricant in this machine of power. Fringe econ historians debate whether such payments significantly impacted military loyalty. Mainstream accounts tend to downplay their scale. But here, the coins glint like captured stars, each a promise of protection or peril. Depending on your cause, you rise to adjust the flame of a brass lamp, stirring saffron-scented oil that crackles softly. Your hands tremble not from fear, but from the thrill of influence. In the world beyond these screens, edicts are ink on parchment here. They're whispered in velvet rooms and sealed with pearls and promises. You marvel that a single word, no louder than a sigh, could realign the empire's might. As the hour wanes, the Kadın Effendi summons you closer. She presses a folded note into your palm, a message for a vizier's confidant meeting in the rose garden at midnight. "Deliver without fail," she intones. You tuck the note into your sash, tasting its weight like a promise of destiny. Historians still search palace archives for records of such clandestine meetings. Given the secrecy, few have been documented, leaving much to speculation. You slip from the salon into shaded corridors where portraits of past Valid sultans silently observe. You recall crocodile dung sunscreen from your first day in the sunlit courtyards, a quirky snippet of palace lore. Yet here, you see that every odd detail, every whispered recipe and ritual ties into this tapestry of influence. Even the smallest trick, an infused fragrance, a strained tea, a slipped coin can tip the scales of power. Emerging into a moonlit garden, you pause by a marble fountain. Water trickles like quiet counsel, reflecting the sultan's turrets and the night sky. Ahead, a eunuch waits by an archway draped in jasmine vines, his lantern casting your shadow long and narrow. He inclines his head at your approach, silent approval that you carry the sultan's sealed word. As you step forward into the jasmine-scented darkness, the palace seems to hold its breath. You realize that power here is fragile, woven from whispers and gilded promises, and that each move you make must be precise, each alliance carefully nurtured or discarded. Life in the harem is not a fantasy of luxury. It's a ruthless game where each player risks everything in silence. You cross the threshold into deeper shadows, clutching the note like a heartbeat, ready to finish tonight's work of empire. For in this clandestine court, every whisper is a weapon, and every promise a powder keg, waiting for the spark of destiny to ignite revolution or ruin. You wake before dawn stiff and feverish, muscles protesting as if attacked by unseen blades, and trudge once more into the harem's hidden infirmary, the dank chamber where illnesses and odd remedies fuse in a grim spectacle. Here, every cough and achy joint is a potential death sentence, and healing is as much ritual as it is medicine. You probably thought ancient palaces boasted grand clinics. Spoiler alert, it's more like a closet full of dried herbs and desperate prayers. So before you settle onto the straw-stuffed pallet, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's tale together. You step into a low-ceilinged room lit by swaying oil lamps. their wicks dripping acrid smoke that stings your eyes. Rows of reed mats line the damp floor, each mat occupied by a moaning concubine, her body curled as if trying to protect itself. Mainstream medical records from the 17th century confirm that respiratory infections were rampant in the harem, where poor ventilation and overcrowding invited diseases like tuberculosis and bronchitis. Historians still argue whether palace physicians truly understood contagion or relied on humoral theory alone. But here, you feel every stifling cough as a reminder that sickness respects no rank. On a low table nearby sits a collection of glass jars and clay pots, powders of powdered ash scraped from copper cauldrons, poultices of crushed licorice root, and vials of bright green liquid you suspect is arsenic tincture, an odd fringe remedy rumored to treat fevers but more likely to poison. Scholars debate whether arsenic was ever used medicinally in the Ottoman court, or if these vials were merely sinister rumors concocted by rival factions. You swallow hard as a nursemaid dips a rag into the green liquid and presses it to your forehead. The sudden chill sends a tremor through your bones. A healer draped in robes of faded indigo moves between beds, murmuring incantations and lighting handfuls of dried basil over charcoal. The basil's smoke curls through the room, its herbal scent clinging to your lungs. Modern phytochemistry acknowledges basil's mild antimicrobial compounds. Yet historians still argue whether Ottoman practitioners recognized these properties or simply relied on centuries of folk wisdom. Regardless, the smoke seems to clear your head, even as it magnifies the musty dampness. Nearby, a young carrier hacks violently, blood flecking her lips. She clutches a chunk of dark bread dipped in vinegar, a crude form of antiseptic gargle. Mainstream sources note that vinegar was used as a disinfectant in Ottoman medical manuscripts, believed to cleanse wounds and soothe inflamed throats. Fringe herbalists claim they sometimes mixed it with pomegranate rind to enhance its astringent power, though scholars still dispute whether this mixture was widespread or confined to private court recipes. The bread crackles in her grip. You offer a sip of watered-down honey afterwards, hoping the sweetness might soothe her burning throat. At the room's far corner, a bath trough stands overflowing with steaming water, infused with rose petals and barley stalks. A healer invites you to sit and soak your swollen ankles, an ancient treatment for joint pain and edema. Mainstream harem accounts confirm that warm soaks were common for maladies from gout to insect bites. Yet historians still debate whether barley stalks imparted genuine anti-inflammatory benefits or merely served as aromatic floaters. You slip your sore feet into the bath. The heat seeps in, relieving the tightness in your calves, if only temporarily, above the trough. Shelves hold ceramic jars of pink clay and ground sandalwood. A nurse scrubs a thick paste onto your arms and legs, murmuring that clay draws out impurities. Modern dermatology notes that certain clays can absorb oils and toxins, but historians still argue whether ancient healers appreciated this effect or if the ritual's symbolic cleansing held more sway. You feel the clay's cool weight settle, filling every contour of your limbs like a plaster cast. A sudden cry draws your gaze. An elderly carrier has collapsed, her body convulsing in spasms. Two attendants hoist her onto a reed mat, where they pour a mixture of pounded garlic and rosewater down her throat. Garlic's sulfur compounds do exhibit antibiotic properties, yet controversy persists among scholars about whether Ottoman physicians recognized their potency or simply saw garlic as a folk cure. The woman's convulsions slow, her breathing deepens, and you feel a tremor of hope, proof that even in this damp, candle-lit infirmary, some remedies may work. Nearby, an attendant unwraps a roll of linen bandages smeared with a paste of crushed poppy seeds and honey. She applies it to a deep laceration on a carrier's forearm, a makeshift analgesic. Mainstream medical texts describe poppy-based opiates introduced to Ottoman pharmacopoeia in the 16th century, though historians still argue whether these substances were used therapeutically among concubines or reserved for elite male patients. Here, you watch the wounded Karia's grimace soften as the paste takes effect. An uneasy comfort in the infirmary's center. A table holds a meticulously carved wooden box containing delicate glass syringes. A healer withdraws dark, viscous liquid, likely a vaccine against smallpox, though mainstream sources contend that variolation practices only diffused in the 18th century. Fringe historians speculate that Ottoman courts may have experimented with early inoculation methods before European physicians recognized the practice. The healer's steady hand injects the liquid into a trembling Karia's arm. She winces, then settles into a feverish sleep. You swallow as you observe this nascent marvel of prevention. Amid the healers and groaning patients, an older Karia sits propped against a wall, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes gleaming with hard-won wisdom. She offers you a sachet of dried mulberry leaves, fragrant and slightly sweet. Mulberry tea was a known folk remedy for digestive ailments. Mainstream accounts mention its use in rural Anatolia, but whether palace physicians endorsed it remains uncertain. You accept the sachet gratefully, tucking it into your sash like talisman against future upset stomachs. The infirmary's door opens as a Valide Sultan's envoy glides in. Flanked by eunuchs, he surveys the patients, his gaze sharp. At his approach, healers and attendants straighten. Even the jars of arsenic seem to shrink in his presence. His visit reminds you that sickness in the harem isn't just a personal trial but a political liability. Any epidemic can threaten not only individual lives but the stability of the entire court. You realize that in this secretive chamber, life hangs by threads of barley stalks and basil smoke, by boiling vinegar and forbidden arsenic tinctures, by the slow infusion of risk and hope. Each remedy, whether rooted in ancient lore or early experimentation, carries its own danger and potential salvation. The way in between magic and medicine, between quackery and genuine cure, unfolds in dim light and whispered incantations. As you rise from your straw mat, you feel the faint warmth of the basin's bath still clinging to your skin, the slight curvature of poultice on your arms, the lingering scent of basil in your nostrils. You clutch the mulberry sachet and sip a bit of the fortified honey vinegar, its sharp tang reminding you that remedies here are double-edged. Relief can come with pain, and healing can harbor poison. You walk toward the infirmary's exit, shoulders straighter, mind alert for fresh assaults of fever or chill. Beyond these walls, the harem's beauty and intrigue await. But in this chamber you've glimpsed its fragility, how easily laughter morphs into coughs, and silken skirts into infirmary gowns. You step back into the corridor's cool twilight, each footfall renewed by the knowledge that in the harem, survival demands not just cunning politics and graceful dance, but mastering the precarious art of healing and harm alike. You're dragged from the murky infirmary into the harsh light of the punishment wing, a grim gallery of iron-barred cells known as the Golden Cage, where transgressions, real or imagined, earn you brutal and sometimes permanent confinement. Picture narrow, torchlit corridors where every echo is the ghost of cries past, and each cell door clangs shut like a verdict. You probably thought the harem's only cruelties were whispered. Spoiler alert. Here, punishments are as public as the midday sun. So before the heavy doors swing open on your fate, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's grim story together. An ivory-faced eunuch hauls you forward, hands gripping your elbows with bone-crushing strength. He shoves you through a pair of iron gates whose bars are chipped and stained, reminders of countless desperate attempts to escape. Mainstream palace records note that the golden cage was reserved for those whose offenses outranked simple disobedience, insulting a Khadan Effendi, forging the Sultan's seal, or plotting rebellion. Historians still debate whether the crown sanctioned all confinements, or if some were punishments meted out by jealous matrons, unofficial and unrecorded, but here. You know every lock click echoes a sentence to isolation. The cell door swings open. Inside, a single narrow mat lies on a raised stone platform stained with salt and sweat. Chains dangle from a ring in the ceiling, meant for those deemed especially dangerous. Tonight, they may remain untouched, a small mercy. But the cell itself is enough punishment. Damp stone walls that weep cold droplets, a tiny window barred against moonlight, and no company but your own panic. A coarse blanket is thrown at your feet. More like a burr-covered rag than bedding, the eunuch spits. 4 nights. No food beyond stale bread and water. Speak but one word, and the rod awaits. He stalks away, boots echoing until silence wraps you in its suffocating arms. You step inside, closing the door with a clang that rattles your bones. Darkness envelops you, broken only by the faint glow of torches beyond the bars. Your heart hammers as you squat onto the stone platform, fingers tracing the blanket's rough weave. You taste dust on your tongue and feel its grit in your hair. In the suffocating hush, you recall rumors of the cell's worst fate, women who entered and never emerged, writhed into madness, their bodies found days later, shriveled like dried figs. Fringe scholars point to secret records hinting at slow-release poisons in the bread. Mainstream historians scoff at such conspiracy theories. Yet the memory of vanished cellmates haunts you, a silent testament to mercy withheld. Hunger claws at your insides as you gnaw on the single piece of flatbread tossed through a slot at your back. The bread is dense with barley and grit. Each bite scrapes your gums. You chase it with a sip of water, stale, tepid, and laced with a faint metallic tang, without the saffron puddings and date platters of the kitchens. This meal tastes like penance. Darkness grows thick. You press your palms on the stone floor, feeling every jagged edge as though the walls themselves intend to punish you. Minutes stretch into hours as you stare at the barred window's tiny square of indifferent sky. Occasionally, you catch a flicker of moonlight dancing across the cell's far wall, a cold reminder that freedom exists just beyond your reach. Suddenly, a distant shout echoes, "Cell 6, stand trial!" The door of a nearby cell clatters open, chains rattle, and footsteps retreat. You hold your breath, heart clenching. Could that be you next? Or another woman convicted of sorcery, an accusation whispered to hide poisoning, or political murder? You press your back against the wall, willing your heartbeat to slow, even as your mind races through possible defenses. It was an accident. I was coerced. I did it for love. All words swallowed by the cell's oppressive quiet. You settle onto the ragged blanket, wrapping it around your shoulders in a feeble shield against the cold stone. Thoughts drift to your fellow prisoners, the old Karia with the fractured wrist, now left unhealed, the young Guzda caught in an illicit embrace, the seamstress accused of stealing a single silk thread. Each exile here is a story cut short, a cautionary tale echoed in every chink of the iron lock. Half the night passes before the eunuch returns, tossing a clay bowl of thin soup through the slot. It glugs onto the platform, watery broth flecked with carrots and scraps of lamb. You clutch the bowl in both hands, breathing in steam that smells faintly of garlic. Historians note that soup was a common cell ration, easier to digest for weakened bodies, but opinions differ on whether the meat scraps were nourishing or merely symbolic cruelty. You lift the bowl to your lips, sipping gratefully even as each swallow burns down your throat after the soup. Silence resumes, Outside, the palace hums on, whispers in the corridors, perfumed fans fanning silk-skirted passages, events continuing as if your scandal never mattered. You press your fingers to your ears, striving to block out the insult of normalcy. In the deepest stillness, your thoughts turn inward, memories of saffron baths, jasmine tea, and stolen dances swirl through your mind like ghosts. You grip the blanket, closing your eyes to summon guidance, a whispered prayer to whatever deity might hear in this night of reckoning. Grant me courage to face dawn, you murmur, voice hoarse. The stone floor hums your confession back at you, a brittle echo. At last, torches flicker outside once more. Dawn approaches. The eunuch returns for the verdict. You rise, legs unsteady, mind racing with possible outcomes. Release in disgrace, extended sentence, exile to the palace's lower levels. Or worse, the cell door creaks open. The eunuch's expression betrays nothing as he gestures you out. You step into the corridor, breath visible in the chill, heart pounding with the taste of freedom. As you emerge, your eyes adjust to torchlight revealing a matron's stern face. She throws a curt nod. Sentence served. Return to your rank. Relief floods you, mingled with the sting of humiliation. You swallow the lump in your throat, head held high, and walk away from the golden cage. Each footstep a test of resolve behind you. The door hisses closed once more, another woman's prison sealed until arbitrator or whim deems otherwise. You look forward, toward the garden paths where whispers will resume, alliances reforge, and the harem's dance of politics and intrigue begins anew. You wrap your shawl tighter, tasting dust and determination, knowing punishment awaits those who slip again. Survival here demands both cunning and caution, lesson learned in stone and shadow. You're summoned before the valid sultan as the sun dips low, casting long shadows over the inner courtyard. Today's trial is the most consequential of all, motherhood's role, where bearing an heir can vault you to unparalleled power, or condemn you to obscurity and peril. Picture a hushed assembly of the sultan's consorts, their cradled infants cooing in swaddling cloths, nurses flitting at their sides, while you stand trembling at center stage, entire futures hinging on the flutter of a newborn's heartbeat. You probably thought motherhood was a blessing. Spoiler alert, here, it's a battlefield, so before your life is reshaped by birth. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's weightiest story together. You enter the Valid Sultan's private pavilion, a room swathed in velvet curtains and perfumed with sandalwood incense. The Valid herself sits on a low divan, her presence radiating authority as she holds a malachite rattle, a ceremonial toy symbolizing fertility and dynastic continuity. Mainstream chronicles confirm that the Valide Sultan wielded immense power, often acting as regent when her son was young. Historians still argue whether her influence was a formal office or an informal outcome of motherhood. But here, her word is law, and your womb's produce determines your fate. A nursemaid leads forward each cradled infant for inspection. One by one, mothers present their sons, swaddled in brocade, eyes bright, faces round with promise. The Sultan's chosen heirs, secure in their place in the line of succession. You stand beside a nurse who offers you a tiny silk cushion embroidered with pomegranates, symbols of fertility and royal favor. Fringe tales claim the harem distributed enchanted pomegranate seeds to expectant mothers. Mainstream scholars debate the existence of such charms, pointing to scant references in medical papyri. You slip a seed into your palm, feeling its cool shape, a totem of hope. The Valid raises a hand, a signal for the next mother to step forward. You slip from the nurse's supportive grasp, hips unsteady from months of swollen ankles and sleepless nights. Each step echoes in the hush. Each breath tastes of rose water and dread. You kneel before the valide, offering your swaddled son, his small fist curled and blinking against the lamp's glow. His cry is soft but urgent, a plea for survival in this crucible of court. The valide studies you both in silence, her eyes sharp as falcons. She lifts the malachite rattle, taps it gently against the marble floor, a ritual test of the child's vitality, a gesture said to awaken the infant spirit. If the baby cries, it signifies health and vigor. Silence suggests weakness or ill omen. The rattle's sound rings through the pavilion, and the baby's wail pierces the hush. Relief flares in your chest. But you do not exhale. This is only phase 1. Next, a court physician steps forward, ivory scalpels in hand, to mark your son's wrist with the Sultan's tugra, a permanent sign of imperial descent and protection. Mainstream sources record that such anointment guaranteed palace privilege for the child and mother. Historians still argue whether marking was purely symbolic or intended as legal proof of lineage. The physician's blade brushes your son's skin. A bead of blood wells, then is pressed onto parchment. You close your eyes, willing yourself not to shriek at the sight of blood on such a small limb. With lineage affirmed, the valide addresses you directly. Mother, your duty to the dynasty is proven. Rise and claim your reward. Well, you stand, legs unsteady but spirit buoyed, as eunuchs bring forward trays of rare musk and amber oil, gifts marking the mother of a prince. These scents symbolize longevity and protection. Blessings from palace alchemists. Fringe perfumers debate whether these oils contained exotic ingredients like civet or opoponax. Mainstream records simply call them royal fragrances. You inhale each vial's essence, letting the smoky sweetness anchor you in this moment of triumph. But triumph here is tempered by peril. The valide's gaze shifts to the other mothers. Remain vigilant, she intones, voice low. Each son above you in rank is both ally and rival. Court memoirs describe how some concubines resorted to poisoning rival infants. Heated arguments still swirl over whether any proof survives. You catch a flicker of fear in another mother's eyes and realize your own child's cradle is more battlefield than nursery. Ahead, a nurse beckons you to a dais where a small group of favored mothers meets regularly with the valide to counsel on state matters, education, alliances, even marriages. These consorts advise the Queen Mother, their sons' futures entwined with policy decisions. Mainstream accounts praise the harem's role in governance. Historians still debate whether these councils had real authority or were ceremonial nods to maternal prestige. You touch your son's swaddling. Could you ever command such influence? As the session ends, you're granted a private moment with the valide. She places a hand on your shoulder, warm and firm. Protect his life and name, she says softly. Your worth to the court will be measured by his deeds. You nod, feeling the weight of both her blessing and her charge. Every future court intrigue, treaty negotiation, and palace uprising may hinge on your son's survival and success. You step from the pavilion into twilight-dappled gardens. The rattles echo still in your ears. Lanterns shimmer beneath tulip trees, and the creak of swing benches drifts through the dusk. Your son sleeps in a nurse's arms, his chest rising in rhythmic promise. You tuck your shawl around your shoulders against the evening chill, clutching the pomegranate seed like an amulet. Each step home through the perfumed corridors is a reminder. Motherhood here is no refuge. It's an arena where love and ambition collide, and every heartbeat shapes history. As you return to your quarters, you pass mothers coaxing their infants to sleep with lullabies in Persian and Turkish. Each lullaby contains a coded prayer for health, favor, and ascendancy. Whispered tests of loyalty and threats of disgrace hang behind the melody. But in that moment, you offer your own soft song, a quiet vow that your son will rise as a prince of legend. This is no simple cradle song. It's your pledge to the dynasty, to your child, and to your own relentless will to survive. Sleep will come later, if at all. For now, you cradle your son against your heart, smelling musk and jasmine on his brow, feeling the fierce pulse of his life echo yours. In the harem's cruel hierarchy, bearing a son has catapulted you forward, but at a price: vigilance, cunning, and an unbreakable bond to palace power. And as night deepens, you whisper into his ear a promise as ancient as empire itself, that you will protect him, even if it costs you everything. You slip away from the Valid Sultan's maternal court into a quiet library chamber filled with the heady scent of aged parchment and sandalwood incense, the space reserved for education and literacy, where the harem's women decipher poetry and craft missives that shift fortunes. Picture shelves of leather-bound manuscripts, calligraphy brushes lined like soldiers, and inkstones carved from jade. You probably thought concubines were kept illiterate to be obedient. Spoiler alert, here, learning is a potent weapon. So before you grasp your reed pen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's scholarly tale together. A tutor in flowing robes, his beard shot through with silver, recites Persian verses in a voice low as a river's murmur. Mainstream palace accounts confirm that elite Ottoman women were taught Ottoman Turkish poetry and Persian classics, languages of diplomacy and art. Historians still argue whether this education fostered genuine literary appreciation or served chiefly as courtly ornamentation. But here, you feel each word resonate like a promise of power. He holds a page of Nizami's Layla and Majnun, its lines looping in elegant script. You trace the curves of each letter with your fingertip, savoring the tactile swell of ink on vellum. The tutor beckons you forward. You dip your reed pen into an inkstone and copy a couplet beneath his watchful gaze. In love's prison blinded, the heart will reign free. You write, your hand trembling as the line curls into existence. The tutor's nod is barely perceptible, but in this chamber, even a slight approval carries weight. Next, he presents a folded letter penned in delicate Divani script, a sample for you to decipher. The letter, addressed to a provincial governor, weaves flattery and threat in equal measure, praise for loyalty mingled with veiled warnings of displeasure. Such letters shaped policy. Mainstream records cite dozens of dispatches originating from the harem. Scholars still debate whether these letters wielded real influence or merely reflected court gossip. But from your seat, you sense the tremor of power in each phrase. You unfold a fresh sheet of ivory paper and begin your translation aloud. May your walls stand firm like the Sultan's resolve. May your loyalty outshine the noonday sun. Your pronunciation falters on noonday, and the tutor corrects your accent gently but firmly. You repeat the line until the phrase rolls off your tongue like silk. Literacy here is both shield and sword. One miswritten word could mean exile. One eloquent phrase might win a palace patron. After translation, you're handed a stack of correspondence to compose, notes to noble patrons, instructions to distant governors, invitations to lavish ceremonies. Each missive demands a precise tone, deferential yet subtly assertive. You dip your pen in gold-infused ink for the highest-ranking recipients, knowing the metallic sheen speaks of wealth and respect. Fringe historians claim some women embedded tiny ciphers in their letters to signal hidden loyalties. Mainstream scholars remain skeptical, citing no surviving examples. Yet as you craft a note promising tribute of rare pearls, you slide a small mark in the text, a silent nod to an ally whose favor you seek. Beside you, A fellow Kariye practices Arabic calligraphy, although Ottoman Turkish was the court's tongue. Arabic remained the language of religion and scholarship. Mainstream sources note that some harem women mastered all three scripts, Arabic, Persian, and Divani, an impressive feat that blurred lines between sacred and secular knowledge. Historians still debate whether this trilingual fluency was widespread or confined to a scholarly elite. Watching your peers' fingers swirl the brush, you realize that each loop and lash is an assertion of intellect and agency in a world that would prefer you silent. A sudden hush falls as the Valid Sultan's envoy appears to deliver a fresh decree. From this day, selected mothers will tutor their sons in letters here, under your guidance. The women shift, excited and apprehensive. Tutoring royal heirs elevates any mother's status. You exchange a quick glance with your tutor. Opportunity glimmers in his eyes. He steps forward, murmurs a phrase in your ear, and you realize he is nominating you to instruct a young prince. Shock and pride war in your chest. Pandits debate whether concubines ever tutored princes directly, or if the decree was ceremonial. Either way, you prepare to shape the mind of dynasty. The remainder of the session passes in a blur of manuscript consultation and lesson planning. You examine illuminated pages, gold leaf halos around saints' portraits, intricate geometric borders hinting at divine order. Each illumination is a reminder that beauty and knowledge intertwine. Each scroll a testament to human ingenuity. Scholars still study these miniatures to trace cross-cultural influences between Persian and Anatolian artists. But here, you absorb their legacy firsthand. As candles gutter low, you close your inkstone and tuck your reed pen away, the day's lessons glowing in your mind like embers. Outside, the corridor's murmurs rise, preparations for evening rituals, the harem's lifeblood once more in motion. You step from the library's hush, the parchment scent clinging to your fingers, and realize that literacy in the harem was never mere ornament. It was a conduit of power, a means of influencing governors, swaying nobles, and potentially saving lives. You walk toward your quarters, stepping lightly past eunuchs and concubines, still absorbed in conversations. Each scroll you copied, each letter you crafted, is a thread in the empire's vast tapestry. In a world where beauty and birthrights reign, letters offer a quieter dominion, one you're only beginning to master. As you drift through candlelit corridors, you breathe in the hush of scholars' ink and the promise that tomorrow, your words may echo in distant courts, shaping destinies unseen. You slip into a dimly lit alcove behind the library's velvet screen, a secret enclave where letters pass like whispered breath. Here begins the most perilous art of the harem, secret correspondence, the clandestine exchange of messages with the outside world that can shift alliances, spark rebellions, or seal your fate. Imagine narrow passages lined with hidden niches, each containing a chipped porcelain pot for smuggled notes. Every breath weighed by the risk of discovery. You probably thought letters were delivered by official couriers. Spoiler alert, here. Every missive is a gamble with your life. So before you fold your parchment and hide your seal, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's tale together. You settle onto a low bench carved from sandalwood, your fingers brushing a stack of thin, vellum pages scented faintly with rosewater. Mainstream court records confirm that during the tulip era of the early 18th century, harem women occasionally dispatched messages to provincial governors and foreign ambassadors, communications that sometimes altered trade agreements or troop deployments. Historians still argue whether these letters wielded genuine influence or served as ceremonial gestures. But in your hands, Each note is a clandestine key that could unlock power or unleash ruin. Beside you, a fellow courier slides a folded note across the bench. You unfold it to reveal a neat script. Instructions for bribing a customs official at the Bosporus Gate. Fringe rumors suggest some harem women used ciphers based on Quranic verses, an ingenious encryption method whispered about in underground circles, though mainstream cryptographers debate whether such ciphers were truly employed or are later embellishments. You study the looping calligraphy, feeling the weight of every promised coin. A eunuch glides past the alcove, his footsteps muffled by thick carpets. You press the letter to your chest, breathing shallowly as he pauses, gaze flicking toward your hidden corner. You remain statue still, counting heartbeats until he moves on. In the harem's web of spies, even eunuchs can be informants. Loyalty here is never guaranteed, and every floorboard carries a whisper. Turning back to your correspondent, you break the seal with a pinch of trembling fingers. Inside is a reply from a merchant in Galata, a list of silks arriving at midnight, allowing you to arrange passage under the cover of darkness. Such external contacts are lifelines, routes out of confinement or conduits for contraband jewels. Mainstream merchant records note that Galata's merchants maintained secret networks with Ottoman elites. Historians still debate how far these ties reached into the imperial court. You tuck the reply into your belt, mind racing with possibilities of alliance. Next, you retrieve a small slip of paper from a chipped ceramic pot embedded in the wall's mortar. It's a coded message from a gozda in the Sultan's private garden, a warning of the Khadan Effendi's plan to frame you for theft. The code uses the first letters of each line of a popular love poem, an elegant scheme scholars debate as either clever invention or apocryphal romance. You memorize the sequence, then refill the pot with your own note, a plea for sanctuary in the caretaker's quarters for the next 2 nights. Your pulse hammers as you seal the pot and press it back into its niche. You trace a hidden groove in the wood panel to ensure it's flush. In the hush that follows, you wonder which whispers will reach their intended ears and which will dissipate into palace rumor. Success means safety. Failure means the golden cage, or worse, disappearance without record. A flicker of torchlight catches your eye. A matron's inspection patrol, clamps of metal rattling at her belt. You slide from the bench, pressing into the curved wall, cloak drawn over your hands. Every breath feels amplified as she inspects the screen's edge, her lashes heavy with kohl. You hold your breath until she passes, then exhale in silent relief, heart still thrumming. You return to your bench and retrieve a fresh sheet of parchment. Carefully, you draft a letter to your lover in Bursa, a silk merchant's son whose shipments of brocade once brightened your chambers. The letter unfolds into a tapestry of longing. Meet me under the fig tree by the old caravan road when the city bells toll for evening prayer. Each word is a calculated risk, for discovery would mean a fatal charge of treasonous correspondence. Fringe poets claim harem love letters hid micro-quilled prayers for deliverance. Mainstream literary critics find scant examples but can't entirely dismiss the possibility. You slip the missive into a clay pot, praying the caretaker's son, who rotates scrolls between chambers, will ferry it beyond palace walls. As you rise to leave, you pocket a final message, a tiny square etched with charcoal, offering clandestine medical recipes for opiate poultices in case of imprisonment. A rival faction might distribute these recipes to win your loyalty or destroy you in shame. Historians still argue whether harem medical knowledge remained secret or circulated widely. Here, you possess its most guarded strands, passing back through the library's scented hush. You imprint the locations of hidden pots in your mind, behind a tapestry of lotus blooms, beneath a carved bench, inside the spout of a decorative fountain. These covert caches are your lifeline, each a silent promise of connection to the outside world. As you navigate the palace's shifting shadows, you realize that every clandestine exchange is a step on a perilous tightrope. One false move, and the entire network collapses. You pause at a latticed window overlooking the Bosporus's silver ribbon. Moonlight glitters on the water, a whisper of freedom beyond the palace's walls. You let the cool breeze skim your cheek, fingertips grazing the clay pot tucked against your waist. In that moment, you understand why secret correspondence is worth risking chains and cells. Each letter carries hope, alliance, and the possibility of escape or vengeance. You whisper a vow to the night, "I will write our story in these hidden chambers, and one day these words will set me free." You slip into the dead of night, heart pounding as you navigate silent corridors whose shadows swallow lantern light. Tonight, you attempt escape attempts and public mutilation, the most desperate gambit in harem lore. Picture secret tunnels beneath Topkapa's gardens, hidden greatways marked by chipped stones, each a potential path to freedom or a trapdoor to agony. You probably thought no one ever fled the Sultan's paradise. Spoiler alert, some pay for that dream with blood and pain. Before you dart into darkness, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's edge of your seat drama together. You creep past a fountain courtyard where moonlight shimmers on marble. Your accomplice, a lowly eunuch who once owed you a favor, awaits behind a tangle of jasmine vines. He thrusts a small iron key into your palm, warning in a whisper that beyond the wrought iron grille lies a narrow passage used by palace servants. Fringe rumors call it the Whispering Grotto, claiming voices of past fugitives still echo there. Mainstream historians dismiss such legends as fanciful, yet you feel the weight of every whispered promise in that key. You slip through the grille into a tight tunnel whose stone walls pulse with dampness. Each step drips water from soot-darkened bricks, and your footsteps seem to swirl into a chorus of distant sobs. Your dress, once flowing silk, is now tucked into your sash. Your slippers are damp and clumsy. You swallow hard, recalling mainstream accounts of tunnels built for water drainage repurposed by desperate souls. Historians still argue whether any tunnels reached beyond the palace grounds or ended abruptly in collapsed arches. You press forward, guided by the eunuch's whispered directions. After a harrowing crawl, you emerge into a narrow cistern lit by a single sliver of moonlight through a high grate. Your sleeve catches on a jagged stone, tearing fabric and skin. You bite back a cry as your wrist bleeds. Blood on silk is a glaring beacon. You wrap your wrist swiftly in a scrap of linen. Fringe medical diaries speak of harem women using mud poultices on such wounds, an idea scholars debate given the risk of infection. But tonight, all you can do is press the cloth tight. Your guide points upwards to another grille. You shimmy up metal rungs, slick with moss, each rung threatening to give way. At the top, you emerge into the quiet of the gardens, fragrance of roses mingling with damp earth. Freedom's first breath tastes of jasmine and fear, but you cannot linger. Beyond the high walls lies the city's labyrinth, and at dawn, patrols will scour the grounds. You step into the moonlit Reflect Pool's basin to mask footprints, then slip across hedges toward the outer gate. A distant lantern casts a glow on the city's minarets, your prize within reach. You break into a run, thoughts whirling, the eunuch's promise of safe passage to Galata, ships waiting, your father's tearful face, the village beyond the sea. Suddenly, torches flare behind you, guards alerted. You falter, heart hammering as footsteps thunder. Panicked, you veer toward the walls and scramble up rough-hewn stones, skirts snagging on prickly vines. You pant, reaching the parapet, then drop silently onto the grass below. But freedom proves fickle. A shout, ordered pursuit, screams through the night. You bolt across cobblestones, breath rasping, as guards emerge. Swords drawn, you round a corner into an open courtyard and see no exit, only the grand hall's looming arches. Panic claws your mind. A guard lunges, collaring you by the wrist. You stagger, spin away, but more swords greet you. Rough hands seize your elbows, and you're dragged before the Valid Sultan's envoy at a brazier's glow. He regards you with cool disdain. The punishment is swift. A chorus of torches flares as you're led to a raised platform beneath the Sultan's balcony. The gathered concubines and eunuchs form a silent circle. You kneel as the palace executioner, a gaunt figure in black, reveals a copper bridle bit, a device meant to pierce lips and pull flesh, like wooden tongs. Public mutilation was rarely recorded in official logs. Historians still debate whether it was reserved for traitors, but tonight, you will bear its mark. Your head bows as the bridle bit's spike is pressed to your lower lip. The metal is ice cold, breath-stealing. You gasp, lips parting, the spike humming against your skin. Fingers clamp your temples. The executioner pulls with slow, merciless force. A snapping sound, a hot shock of agony as flesh tears. You bite back a cry, eyes rolling before they lock in a tearless gaze. Blood wells and soaks your scarf. The crowd watches in shuttered silence, faces masked by soft veils. Someone whispers, "She dared dream beyond these walls." You taste blood and fear, mouth numb yet pulsing with pain. The executioner tosses the bit aside. A eunuch clamps a metal mask over your mouth to conceal the wound. Now you will eat, speak, and breathe behind iron doors. Your escape attempt condemned to memory and scar. Guards haul you away, each step a bound of shame. Your cries echo only in your head, swallowed by palace stones. You're thrown into the golden cage once more, where the iron bars greet you with cold indifference. Through dusk-shrouded windows you glimpse jasmine petals drifting down, symbols of beauty and fleeting hope. Inside your cell, you press cloth to lip, tasting the copper tang of fresh blood. Pain shivers up your spine, but shame stings more. You realize that, in the harem's brutal logic, any attempt at freedom demands not only imprisonment, but a permanent reminder, a mark of one's overreach as dawn's pale light seeps through the barred window. You cling to a bitter truth. Even scars can't seal your silence completely, for in hushed corners, mothers still whisper your name, weaving your tale into the harem's lore, warning and inspiration entwined like thorned roses. You wake before dawn to the clash of steel on steel and the pungent tang of burning mortar echoing through the palace. Today's upheaval is Western reforms and bloody backlash, the violent struggle over modernizing the harem's traditions. Imagine scaffolded lattice screens torn down to make way for French windows, soldiers in frock coats drilling where eunuchs once marched in swept silks, and palace guards sparring with reformist officers under torchlight. You probably thought the harem was sealed in time. Spoiler alert, it's a battleground for the empire's soul, and you're caught in the crossfire. So before you steady your spine and step into this chaos, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's story together. You slip from your reed mat and thread through corridors, where scaffolding groans beneath the weight of craftsmen, chiseling away arabesque patterns to install iron-framed windows. Mainstream history notes that the Tanzimat reforms of 1876 mandated sweeping changes across the Ottoman domains, extending even to the palace's most hidden chambers. Historians still debate whether these reforms aimed at genuine modernization or were tactical concessions to European powers. But here, you taste revolution in every spark of a torch and feel it in every cracked tile underfoot. As you emerge into the half-demolished courtyard, you find a row of Turkish lanterns snuffed out by the old guard's orders, replaced by crude gas lamps imported from Vienna. Their harsh flames throw lacquered floorboards into stark relief, revealing coins, petals, and tiny breastplates, remnants of yesterday's privilege now trampled in the dirt. Fringe architects whisper that some Viennese lamps came with hidden propaganda pamphlets glorifying Western monarchies. Mainstream scholars dismiss these tales as fanciful, but you find scraps of paper printed in German lodged in masonry cracks. You fold one into your sash, proof that even lamps can light the fire of intrigue. Ahead, palace guards in Prussian-style tunics and shakos march in rigid formation, rifle butts clattering against their heels. The clank of modern military boots drowns out the eunuch's usual soft boots, and the air thrums with the tension of two worlds colliding. Mainstream military records confirm the Ottoman army's 19th century rearmament along European lines. Yet officers still argued ardently over retaining traditional curved scimitars. Historians still debate whether the new drills improved battlefield performance or merely hampered mobility with their stiffness. But here you witness the question in every hiss of flintlock and squeak of leather gaiters. Suddenly, a shrill whistle splits the air, a signal that the old guard refuses to yield. From one side, robed eunuchs armed with ornate scimitars and ceremonial maces charge, their curved blades gleaming beneath the lantern light. From the other, reformist officers brandish bayonets and sabers, their jackets straining at the seams as they push forward. You dive behind a toppled column, silk skirts billowing, and patch a torn hem with trembling fingers. A light joke flits through your mind. Who knew wallpaper and sabers made such a deadly combination? But you swallow the laugh. Discretion is the new decorum. A clash erupts beside an overturned silk screen. A reformist officer slashes at a eunuch's neckpiece. The eunuch parries, steel ringing. You scramble toward a scattered crate of perfumed cushions, stuffing one beneath your knees to hide from stray sparks. The cushions smell of jasmine and old power, a wicked contrast to the crack of gunfire. Fringe pharmacists claimed jasmine oil could calm nerves under fire. Mainstream toxicologists remain skeptical. But you press a cushion to your face anyway, hoping the scent dulls your panic. A firebrand reformer named Hassan Pasha, celebrated for his zeal in adopting French customs, steers the skirmish toward the old kitchens. Collapsing archways rain plaster and soot onto copper cauldrons. A cook's apprentice emerges bleeding from a shard of tile, clutching a cleaver as if desperate to defend his mother's recipes. You help him to his feet, murmuring, "This isn't a butcher's block, it's a battlefield." And he shoots you a grateful grin before hurrying off to tend his wounds. In a place where spice mixes with blood, even an apprentice's courage tastes like saffron. Across the courtyard, a squad of reformist engineers erects scaffolding to replace marble columns with cast iron posts stamped "Made in London." The posts clank as they're hoisted upright, and the sound feels like betrayal echoing through centuries. One technician hands you a small sample of the imported iron, a cold, weighty reminder that the world beyond the palace walls now dictates its shape. You tuck the scrap into your belt, a token of change you neither invited nor fully understand. A sharp crack rings out. The eunuchs have retaliated, smashing a gas lamp and plunging the western wing into darkness. Shouts of "Uphold tradition" mingle with "Embrace the future" as the two sides collide in a roiling mass of silk and steel. You seize the moment to slip toward a hidden passage beneath a shredded tapestry, a route you memorized in Section 17's escape drills. Beneath the chaos, your heart pounds with adrenaline and regret that the passage sits ready, but tonight leads deeper into bloodshed rather than freedom. As you press into the passage, you catch a glimpse of the Valid Sultan ascending a dais erected near the central pool. her jeweled staff raised in a plea for calm. Her voice rings out, echoing off shattered columns. "This palace is our heart. Do not let it bleed." Mainstream court records suggest the Valide intervened in several palace coups. Historians still debate whether her appeals held genuine authority or were ceremonial gestures tonight. Her command pierces the clamor like a clarion call, and both sides hesitate, swords raised. You slip out of the passage into the calmer shadows of the treasury wing, where rows of gilded artifacts lie under glass. A curator, an elderly carrier once dubbed the Sultan's Memory, stands beside a display of ivory combs and ruby-studded locks. She murmurs, "They'll burn these relics next," her eyes haunted by the thought. You help her cover the display with a velvet cloth, whispering that preservation begins with secrecy. In this wing, heritage clings to life under ivory domes, yet even memory must bow to reform's bulldozer. From the treasury, you thread back toward your quarters, slipping through corridors half ruined, half rebuilt. The clash of tradition and modernity follows you like a specter. As you pass a newly installed water fountain, imported from Milan, its jets spraying like miniature nymphs, you pause. Water flows in arcs the engineers bragged would rival Versailles. Mainstream architectural journals heralded it as a sign of Ottoman sophistication. You run your hand through the jet's cool mist, tasting metal and ambition on your tongue. At last you reach your chamber's threshold. Torn screens behind you and unfamiliar iron frames ahead. You close the door behind you and sink onto your reed mat, body hollow with exhaustion, mind heavy with the day's revelations. The palace's stones seem to pulse with new purpose and old grief, a heartbeat split between two worlds. Before sleep claims you, you press your palm to the wrought iron window beside your mat, tracing its cold lattice like a penance. The courtyard's echoes fade, but the clang of hammers and clash of sabers linger in your ears. You realize that in this era of reform and backlash, every change demands sacrifice, and often blood. You whisper into the night, "May tomorrow's dawn bring clarity, not more carnage." And with that fragile hope, you close your eyes, ready to face whichever outcome the new order or the old decrees at sunrise. You rise slowly, the night's uneasy dreams still lingering as wisps of jasmine on your pillow, and step into the dawn's first light. Today's reckoning is harem legacy, the lingering imprint of this world on art, literature, and the very fabric of society long after its gates closed. Picture hushed scholars translating palace memoirs by candlelight, poets weaving secret verses about unseen corridors, and painters capturing the last veiled figures in fading frescoes. You probably thought the harem's story ended with the empire's fall. Spoiler alert, its echoes reverberate through centuries of culture and identity. So before you wander the palace's silent halls one last time, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's reflective journey together. You pass through a gallery of faded tapestry depicting courtly scenes, dancers frozen mid-pirouette, handmaidens offering trays of sweets, concubines reclining beside fountains. Mainstream art historians confirm that European travelers in the 18th and 19th centuries collected harem sketches and watercolors, fueling an Orientalist craze that both romanticized and distorted the harem's reality. Historians still debate whether these works offer genuine insight or merely project Western fantasies. But here, you see both truth and myth woven together in silk and pigment. In a quiet corner, a scholar pores over a stack of handwritten memoirs, codices penned in flowing Divani script. The pages crackle as she turns them, revealing glimpses of daily routines, secret loves, and whispered betrayals. Mainstream archival efforts have preserved dozens of these manuscripts, yet historians still argue over their authenticity. Were they secret journals smuggled out by consorts? or later fabrications by enterprising biographers. Either way, each line pulses with the heartbeat of lives lived behind locked doors. You lean in to read a passage. We adorned our bodies in jewels and song, yet our voices were chained to the Sultan's whims. The words sting like a scorpion's tail, beauty and bondage inseparable in those gilded halls. You trace the elegant curves of each letter, feeling a kinship across centuries with the woman who dared record her truth. Beside the historian, an art restorer delicately cleans a lacquered manuscript cover. He reveals an intricately painted scene, a valid sultan surrounded by her daughters and loyal consorts, their faces radiant with both pride and resolve. Fringe codicologists claim hidden symbols in the painting, minuscule emblems of secret sisterhoods that bound concubines across rank and origin. Yet mainstream experts caution against over-reading motifs common in Islamic art. Still, you study the tiny flourishes, envisioning bonds forged beneath those painted veils. In the gallery's center stands a life-sized statue of a dancing concubine, a modern tribute carved from marble in the early 20th century. Her form is idealized, fluid hips, lifted arms, eyes cast down as if caught in a moment of joyful abandon. Critics have praised the sculpture as a feminist reclamation. Detractors decry it as another layer of exoticism. Historians still argue over its place in the narrative. Is it homage or appropriation? Standing before it, you see both, a monument to resilience and a mirror of perception. You move to a side chamber filled with musical instruments, ouds with cracked varnish, tambourines ringed with rusting jingles, and a tarnished ney flute mat to where memorized melodies once drifted. Researchers confirm that Western composers like Mozart and Debussy borrowed Eastern scales after hearing harem music through diplomatic channels. Scholars still debate the depth of these influences. You lift the flute, blow a tentative note. The melody wavers like a breath lost between worlds. In that single note, you hear centuries of longing. Near the back, you find a small display of ceramic pots, whisper jars, once hidden in secret corridors to pass messages, like the one you used in Section 16. Ethnographers note that similar message pots exist in other cultures' underground networks. Historians still argue whether these were uniquely innovative or simply parallel inventions. You pick up a jar, feeling the indentations where fingers rubbed centuries ago, your own legacy entwined with theirs. Finally, you step into a domed reading room where poets recite ghazals inspired by the harem's secluded lives. A line rings out, "My heart a dove in gilded cage, longing for open skies." Mainstream literary critics cite dozens of Ottoman poems drawing on harem imagery. Scholars still debate whether these were penned by women or by male poets adopting female personas. Here, in the poet's softly spoken words, you sense the universal ache for freedom that transcends walls of stone and screens of wood. As your final act in these halls, you place a single white jasmine blossom on a low marble pedestal, a gesture of remembrance and tribute. The flower's petals drift onto parchment fragments beneath, echoes of lost voices, fragments of memoirs, stubborn testimonies of lives both radiant and confined. You step back, breathing in the room's hushed reverence. Beyond these walls, the city carries on, and future generations will reinterpret the harem's legacy through art, literature, and scholarship. Yet here, in this intimate chamber, you're part of an unbroken chain. Women whose stories, whether hidden or heralded, shape our understanding of power, beauty, and resilience. As you make your way toward the outer gates, the tapestries whisper farewell, their threads shimmering in the dusk. You realize that the harem's true legacy is not in its opulent walls, but in its enduring capacity to inspire, caution, and remind us that every gilded cage tells a story of both bondage and bravery. You slip from the gallery's hushed reverence into the cool pre-dawn air, of the palace's outer gardens. Today marks your final trial, closing reflections, where you reckon with the harem's beauty and brutality as your story draws to its close. Picture moonlit fountains rippling under jasmine boughs, their petals drifting like memory across marble paths. You probably thought these gardens were mere decoration. Spoiler alert, in their silence, you hear the echoes of every secret, every scar, and every stolen moment of hope. So before you settle on a shaded bench to gather your thoughts, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's quiet farewell together. You stretch out on a carved stone seat, the coolness seeping into your bones. Mainstream memoirs from former palace scribes confirm that concubines often stole away to these gardens for reflection, finding brief respite from torrid intrigues and unrelenting duty. Historians still debate whether such retreats were officially tolerated or tacitly ignored. But here, the very scent of jasmine feels like permission to breathe. Above, the sky fades from indigo to rosy violet as dawn stirs. You trace the path you've walked through this world, from your first terrified steps into the golden cage of roll call, through the pain of crocodile dung sunscreen and the weight of jeweled finery, into the silent power plays of political intrigue, and the horror of failed escape and cruel mutilation. Each memory glints like a gemstone in a mother-of-pearl mosaic, beautiful yet cold, captivating yet unforgiving. A gentle breeze stirs the water in a nearby fountain, sending ripples that shimmer like fractured mirrors. Fringe poets claimed these ripples encoded secret messages for lovers awaiting at the palace gates. Mainstream scholars dismiss such poems as romantic embellishments, yet as you watch the pattern shift, you half believe it spells out your own name in braille of light and shadow. You rise, stepping along the gravel path that crunches beneath your slippers, an oddly satisfying sound after years of polished marble. 3 light jokes flit through your mind about sand in silks, rogue pomegranate seeds, and perfume mishaps so pungent they could test the Sultan's patience. You chuckle softly in the dawn hush, grateful for humor as essential as breath. Even here in final reflection, ahead, a row of low hedges marks the boundary between the harem and the wider world. Beyond them lie the city's bustle, the docks where silks arrive, the markets where spices dance, the minarets calling faithful to prayer. Mainstream travelogues note that many former concubines found new lives as teachers or patrons in provincial towns. Historians still argue how many truly left the palace's shadow versus those who perished or vanished into obscurity. You look outward, imagining a life that stretches beyond these scented walls. A lone gardener polishes the stone urns that line the central pond, humming an old Anatolian lullaby. You approach and share a wry nod. He tips his straw hat. No words needed to acknowledge shared survival in this realm of layered secrets. You tip your head, marveling that the simplest human connection can outshine the grandest courtly decree. Kneeling by the pond's edge, you scoop up cool water in your palms and let droplets fall gently back, watching concentric circles fade. Life within the harem was a series of concentric circles, each rank, each secret enclave, each whispered promise or threat. Fringe anthropologists suggest that the pond's design echoed the concentric hierarchy of the harem itself, a symbolic microcosm of power. Mainstream architects argue it was merely aesthetic. You dip a finger in the water, sending a new ripple, and decide symbolism feels more comforting than skepticism right now. As the sky brightens to pale gold, you lean back and breathe deeply, the air tasting of cool stone and awakening. You remember the night you slept under the stars on the pyramid's ledge, a distant echo of this moment's fragile peace. Both were tests of endurance, and both ended with a fragile calm that whispered, "You survived." Rising, finally, you gather your shawl and walk towards the palace gate. The guards nod polite farewells, not threats, recognizing that you leave with both scars and stories. You clutch the pomegranate seed you carried since Section 14, its surface worn smooth. It feels like a heartbeat in your palm, small, vital, and impossible to crush. At the gate, sunlight spills across the courtyard, banishing the lantern's glow. You step onto the threshold between constrained life and open sky. Beyond lies uncertainty, love, loss, hardship, freedom, but also possibility. Mainstream chronicles recount that a few concubines ventured into merchant life or became educators. Historians still search for concrete records of their fates. Tonight, you forge your own story beyond the palace's chapters. Before you cross the line, you pause, you inhale the morning air, letting it fill lungs accustomed to perfumed confinement. You exhale, releasing every last fragment of dread in your mind. You replay the cheeky jokes that buoyed you, the rituals that taught you resilience, the alliances that forged your survival, and the scars, both visible and hidden, that will remain your strength. You step forward, crossing the boundary. The palace behind you stands silent, its secrets sealed once more. Ahead, the world awaits, its horizons vast as imagination. You carry the harem's legacy in your heart, its power, its pain, its poetry, and as your silhouette merges with the bustling dawn beyond the gates, you whisper to yourself, "This is only the beginning." End of story. Sweet dreams.